I call the meeting to order, ask the clerk to call the roll.
Mayor Williams?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Marshburn?
Present.
Councilmember Behringer? Here. Councilmember Kennedy?
Here.
Councilmember Singleton?
Here.
And Councilmember Vance.
Here. Mayor Pro Tem Ken Marshall, lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand. Join me in honoring our country by saying the Pledge of Allegiance, if you will. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, I was remiss in not being able to get the pastor friend of mine who ordinarily would have been here this evening to lead us in our invocation. So instead, I'm going to ask those of you who are so inclined to join me in a moment of silence, remembering those victims of the hurricane that just crossed over the islands of the Bahamas and others that are in its path now. So those of you who care to join me now, if you will. And an amen. Okay, next is petitions and comments. Next time on the agenda for anyone to address the council, all right? Not on the agenda. If you wish to address the council, come to the podium, state your name and address. Hearing none, the adoption of the agenda.
Thank you. I'm Steve Muni. Oh, to that one. Thank you. Steve Muni, 2527 Wynn Road. I just wanted to thank you for this opportunity to stand up here and speak briefly. I want to say first, I'm all in favor of progress and of growth in this area, but I am a bit concerned about rapid growth on New Bethel Road, especially considering the disconnection of New Bethel to Cornwallis that was cut off when the Highway 70 Express went in. And my understanding of a proposed more than 1,000 additional residents off of New Bethel Road. Yes, sir.
Muni?
Muni?
I'm sorry.
Yes.
I apologize. This item is on the agenda, so we really can't
It is
talk
on the
about it.
agenda?
Yes.
Yes.
Is it not?
Hey, the Bethel project is not on the agenda, and we don't know if you're referring to the Bethel project or the Oak Park project.
The Bethel project.
And so it's not on the agenda tonight, so technically, he probably has an
But it's
opportunity.
also currently under review, and we're
I
not open
understand
to
that.
those
And that's simply
communications.
all I wanted to say, is that I'm in favor of growth, but I'm concerned that with that exit from New Bethel Road cut off on that end, we only have two ways in and out, and a total of about, potentially, if this happens, around 3,000 residents trying to use two ways in and out to two-lane roads. That's my concern. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Okay, petitions, adoption of the agenda. Mr. Mayor, I move adoption of the, do you have an
Someone came
amendment?
forward, someone just,
Anyone else, please Oh, come. excuse me.
you want to make that, well, before,
Excuse me.
before he starts, let's make this announcement.
Right, yeah.
That might help a
Yeah,
little.
let me, have you signed anything?
I have not signed.
Okay, well, come over here if you will, so the clerk can get your name and address. But ladies and gentlemen, the Bethel matter was advertised in a letter that went out to some of you as being on the agenda tonight. It's not ready to come forward for hearing, so the Bethel matter is not on the agenda. And the appropriate thing to do would be to come back. You'll get another notice to come back when that case is on the agenda and talk about it at that time. If you, is that what you plan to talk about, the Bethel case?
Oh, Park West.
Park West, okay, Park West. Petitions and comment is not an appropriate time for that because that is on the agenda tonight.
I see.
Thank you, sir. Sorry, it's all very confusing, but we have these rules that we go by. And
We'll get around to you.
thank you, sir.
Anyone else? Let's try the adoption of the agenda.
I'm going to try that one more time unless I didn't detect any need for any amendment. So I'm going to move that this council approve the agenda as prepared by our town clerk and as available to us this evening.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Okay, presentations. Councilmember Kennedy has a proclamation and a presentation to make.
Kay Whaley, would you come up, please? Ladies and gentlemen, the proclamation before us tonight is regarding Constitution Week, and the Daughters of the American Revolution make this request of the council to issue this proclamation declaring the week of September 17th through the 23rd is Constitution Week. The library promotes it with materials and perhaps other organizations. Kay Whaley is a longtime member of DAR. They are actually meeting tonight, but and it's on their agenda that this happened. So it's been in progress, and so I'm going to read this proclamation and then present it to Kay for carrying forth to the DAR. Whereas our founding fathers, in order to secure the blessings of liberty for themselves and their posterity, did ordain and establish a Constitution for the United States of America. And whereas it is of the utmost importance that all citizens fully understand the provisions and principles contained in the Constitution in order to support, preserve, and defend it against encroachment. And whereas September 17, 2019 marks the 232nd anniversary of the signing of the Constitution of the United States of America by the Constitutional Convention. And whereas Public Law 915 guarantees the issuing of such a proclamation each year by the President of the United States of America, designating September 17th through 23 as Constitution Week. And whereas the celebration of the Constitution was started by the Daughters of the American Revolution in 1955, DAR petitioned Congress to set aside the week of September 17th through the 23rd annually to be dedicated for the observance of Constitution Week. This resolution was later adopted by the U.S. Congress and signed into public law on August 2nd, 1956 by President Dwight D. Eisenhower. Now, therefore, Ronnie S. Williams, the mayor of the town of Garner, hereby proclaims September 17th through 23 as Constitution Week in Garner, and urges all citizens to affirm the ideals of the framers of the Constitution had in 1787 and reflect on the privilege of being an American with all the rights and responsibilities which that provision involves, remembering that lost rights may never be regained. Signed, Ronnie Williams. And we're most proud to present that to DAR and to
I'm
you.
very proud to accept it. Constitution Week is very important to every U.S. citizen in America.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you, Ron.
Okay, that's the only presentation. Consent item, the 4 items. Pleasure of the board.
Move approval of consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion made, second for discussion. All in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed. There are several public hearings. We'll start on them now. Mr. Henderson, do you want to make any comments before we begin?
Oh, yes, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ladies and gentlemen, as town attorney, it's my obligation to make some comments about a couple of the proceedings, the procedure to be followed in a couple of proceedings we have before us here tonight, because they involve a hybrid situation where we have zoning hearing, and then we have mixed in with that a hearing on a permit, which is considered in the law to be a quasi-judicial proceeding, which means sort of like a court, and there's a lot of formalities we have to follow. So basically, the first one we're going to call for hearing is CUDZ 1907, and CUD means conditional use district zoning. and CUP SP 1922. And CUP means conditional use permit. So we got the zoning hearing and the permit. 200 Britt Valley Road. These comments will also apply, and the procedure we talk about and the regulations to the next one, which is a resumption of the hearing in the Oak Park West case. In the Britt Valley Road, the first thing that will happen is that the planning staff, Mr. Bamford here, will give a presentation of the staff's review of this application and action on it by the Planning Commission. Then the applicant will have an opportunity to make some comments on the zoning request. Then members of the public will have an opportunity to make comments on the zoning request. And then we'll move to a separate phase of this hearing, which involves a review of the more technical matters that are involved in the permit itself. Now, this Britt Road case, you'll see, is going to be a fairly simple case. There are many much more complicated cases, but the procedure is essentially the same. The testimony that's given in connection with the details of the permit is by law restricted to people who have background, skills, training, and experience to be expert witnesses in connection with, some field of planning, engineering, landscape architecture, whatever in a particular case. And it's not a range of opportunities for public input on the permit itself. Having said all that, I will say there are a couple of other technical things that apply. In the quasi-judicial portion of the hearing, the testimony must, according to the law, be sworn testimony. So I'll ask anyone who, a staff member or anyone who is going to appear to give technical expertise type testimony on the permit itself, to come forward and be sworn at this time. What? Yeah, this would be the expert witnesses in the Britt Valley case, not the public. Law also requires that there are two inquiries which must be made of the council in connection with the quasi-judicial part of this case. And the first of those inquiries is regarding whether the members of the council have received any communications from anyone on behalf of or opposed to the application. Technically, the way the law is written, those communications are not supposed to occur. We know sometimes they occur because people don't know they're not supposed to. And so the way to cure that problem is to ask the council if they would disclose whether they've had any ex parte communications in connection with this Britt Valley case.
Anybody? We're good.
The other question we have to ask the council is whether any member of the council has previous bias or preconceived notions that would determine his or her decision in this case to the extent they could not be swayed by testimony at the hearing. Does anyone have any such preconceived? If they don't, then we've passed the legal test on getting this case ready to try, as the judge was saying, so we'll call Mr. Bamford for the staff presentation.
I'm going to open the public hearing.
Good evening, Mayor
Yeah.
and members of council. This is a zoning request that is a conditional use application. This case came to you originally back in July as a general use rezoning. And at the public hearing, there were concerns about permissible uses in the R40 zoning district. And so staff has worked with the applicant to convert this from a general use over to a conditional use application. And there are use restrictions that are proposed. The site's 5.5 acres in size. The site's located at 200 Britt Valley Road, and the requested zoning is from residential 20 to residential 40 conditional use district. This is a vicinity map of the area. This is 1010 Road that runs along the south, and Benson Road runs north to south over to the east. This is a map of the rezoning property outlined in orange. It's 5.5 acres in size and located at the end of Britt Valley Road. The street is a private street. It's not maintained by NCDOT or Town of Garner, and there are several single-family homes that are constructed on this road. The predominant zoning in this area is residential 20, which is single-family, stick-built, or modular homes. Minimum lot size is 20,000 square feet. This is a list of rezoning cases in this area of Garner. The oldest one was from 1994. That was the RMH zone that was done in the area, and the most recent case was 2018, and that site was located on Jordan Road. The difference between the existing and proposed zoning, both are single-family zoning districts. R20 does have a size limitation on accessory buildings such as a detached garage, and that limitation is that it can be no larger than 50% the size of the heated square footage of the home. The R40 zoning district also allows single-family uses. Minimum lot size is 40,000 square feet. In R40 zoning, there is no size limit on a detached accessory building. And that is the primary reason for this request, is the applicant wants to build a detached garage that is bigger than 50% the size of the home on the lot. This is a comparison between the existing and proposed zonings. The front, rear, and side setbacks are the same. The densities are different, the minimum lot width is different, and the minimum lot area is different as well. The applicant is proposing to restrict the permissible uses to the uses that are highlighted in yellow on the next two slides. So on this slide, single-family detached would be permissible in the proposed zoning district. All other uses listed here would not be permissible. The uses in yellow on this slide would be permissible in the proposed zoning, and the uses that are not highlighted would be prohibited on the site. And that would include manufactured homes, telecommunications towers, solar farms, and other major utilities. So under this request, the applicant is proposing to limit the range of R40 uses. The Garner Ford plan has this area designated as low-density residential, and this has a recommended density of 2.5 units per acre or less. Garner's R40 and R20 zoning districts would fit in within this designation. And these are areas that do not have public water and sewer, so they are typically served with private well and septic, so the lot sizes would be larger. This rezoning request from R20 to R40, conditional use district 200, is consistent with the future land use map of the Garner Ford plan. And I'm going to move into the conditional use permit portion. The site's 5.5.
David, why don't we listen, hear the applicant and the public on the zoning at this point, if you would? Would that work? Does the applicant wish to be heard on the zoning part of this without getting into the technical parts?
We're asking everyone who speaks tonight to limit their comments to 3 minutes, beginning with this gentleman.
Good evening. Thank you for your time. Just to add to what Mr. Bamford says, as it was August, I think, no, July, last time I spoke with you. And
Name and address.
I'm sorry, Scott Reagan, 200 Britt Valley Road. The main reason for the rezoning was the accessory building. And so as we discussed at the meeting I was at a couple of months ago, I had no problem striking some of the other uses of R40 that I know the council as well as some of the neighbors were concerned about and didn't want, and frankly, I didn't want either. So as he said, this was, just to remind you, this was a property that has 3 very old tobacco barns that kind of count against our accessory building footage already. So we, under the regulation, I couldn't even build a small shed or garage, and so that was the primary reason we wanted to get rezoned R40 to be able to build that accessory building that will be a little bit bigger than half the square footage of the current home that I'm in. But I'll be glad to answer any questions if you have any.
Is this a garage that we're parking vehicles in, or is this a repair type of garage?
It's going to be a combination of both. We have a RV, so we're going to be able to park a family RV in it. We also wanted a portion of it to be kind of a concrete floor garage to work on my son's go-karts or four-wheelers and things of that nature. And then there'll be a third part of it that we wanted to be a heated and cooled space where we may actually put like a guest bedroom in for people who come to visit us.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Well, thank you.
Okay, we'll move into the conditional use permit portion. The proposed use is single family with an accessory building proposed to be constructed at a later time. So there is no building permit in right now for this accessory building. However, the house has been constructed on the site over the last several months. Going into our report for required landscaping buffers, required parks and open space, fire protection, stormwater management, parking and lighting. These items would not apply to the construction of one single-family house or the construction of an accessory building. So under these categories, we don't have anything that would be required as part of this permit. This site does have a riparian buffer along the northeastern portion of the site, and this will be shown on the survey in the next slide. And the site slopes, I guess, towards the northeast. The site does not have any FEMA floodplain on it. As far as water and sewer, there is no public water and sewer in this area, so the site would be served by private well and septic. And this is a survey of the lot. The riparian buffer is located here. The single-family house has been constructed and did receive a certificate of occupancy about maybe a month and a half ago, but the accessory building would be constructed at a later time. The plot plan does show the location of the accessory building in this location. There are some existing barns on the site, and those are also pointed out on this map here and also here. Our transportation plan does not call for any road improvements for Britt Valley Road, and Britt Valley Road is a private road. It is maintained by the property owners that have property on that road. As far as conformity with the Parks and Rec and open space greenway plans, there are no additional recommendations for this particular site. So therefore, this project may be considered in conformity with the Parks and Recreation, Open Space, and Greenways Master Plan. Staff has reviewed this request and that it does conform to the regulations of the Unified Development Ordinance. The property did receive a building permit, did meet building setbacks, did receive a certificate of occupancy, and when the accessory building permit comes in at a later time, it will have to get a building permit and meet our lot side setbacks. Planning Commission did review this case at their August 2019 meeting, and with a unanimous vote, they did recommend, or they did confirm staff's findings that this request was in conformity with the town's plans and policies, and also accepted staff statements regarding zoning consistency with the Garner Forward Comprehensive Plan. I'll be happy to answer any questions. For the zoning motion, refer to page 23 in your packet. And for the conditional use permit motion, refer to page 25.
Hearing none, we'll move to the next. Okay, you've got two motions to make, right?
Yes, sir. First on the zoning and then on the
DD.
site plan.
Mayor, there's not going to be any expert evidence in this case other than Mr. Bamford, so it'd be appropriate to close the file and have a motion unless someone has some questions for Mr. Bamford. Close the hearing and have a motion.
Okay, motion.
Were there any persons in the audience that wanted to speak to the issue at all? I assume not. Okay.
I have a motion in mind, but Mr. Reagan, wanted to thank you for your indulgence to go through this process and change your zoning procedure to accommodate a number of expressed concerns. I know it slowed you up. It may have incurred some costs, but this, I think, will serve you well. It achieves your objective in the long run, and appreciate your indulgence and cooperation in working with us. I'd like to go ahead and make a motion on CUDZ 1907, find it consistent with the comprehensive plan and approved. Therefore, I move that the town council accept staff statements regarding zoning consistency with the Garner Forward Comprehensive Plan detailed in section 5 of the report as our own, and I therefore move that the town council adopt ordinance 2019-3992 approving rezoning request CUDZ 1907 as it is reasonable and in the public interest because it'll likely be compatible with the surrounding zoning and allow development that's compatible with the existing uses in the area.
Second the motion.
Motion made and second on the zoning. Further discussion. All in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
And I'm ready to move on to the next part on CUP SP 1922. I find it consistent with the town plans and ordinances and recommend approval. Therefore, I move that the council accept staff's recommend or statements regarding plan consistency with section 7 of the report as our own and find the application meets the 10 permit criteria in section 3.14.d and therefore approve CUP SP 19-22 Britt Valley Road with the 3 standard conditions to be listed on the permit that will be prepared by staff.
Second.
Second.
Further discussion. All in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
Mr. Mayor, the next matter we'll be coming to then is PDZ 1903 and MP 1903 Oak Park West. For the benefit of public who may not have been here when his case was heard 2 weeks ago, PDZ is a type of planned residential development under a conditional use format, just similar to the Britt Valley Road case we just heard. Conditional use is a type of zoning where instead of using a general zoning district, the zoning is conditioned and limited to certain specific uses or excluding certain specific uses and imposing certain conditions in addition to what's in the normal zoning ordinance. To bring you up to date on where we are on this matter was heard roughly 2 weeks ago into the late hours of the night, and at the end of the evening, council began its deliberations. The council expressed some interest in having an opportunity to carry this case over, to have an opportunity to perhaps ask some questions, learn a little bit more about it. And so basically, the general idea is that this matter is not intended to be a hearing where everybody gets up and says the same things all over again that were said 2 weeks ago, but it's an opportunity for a council to ascertain answers to some very specific questions that they might have. Since it has been carried over, though, and since it is a quasi-judicial hearing that is subject to the various laws that I mentioned before, I would ask the council, again, as we did last week, upon the call of this case for hearing, if any members of the council have received any ex parte communications, and if you are, please disclose them generally as to the nature and type.
I suspect several of us have received emails from folks that live in the area, but that's
I got
that's
4.
it.
That would be true, certainly, yeah. Even today, yeah, receive emails.
And having said that, I think we've probably clarified that for the purpose of the record. Basically, if we're going to proceed in the fashion that I just mentioned, then I will tell, for the benefit of persons who were not here last time perhaps, we went through a long presentation in which the staff gave its reported the recommendation of the Planning Commission. The applicant had a number of witnesses, and the members of the public had, I don't know, what, 15, 18, 20 witnesses who came forward and spoke. And as I say, we went on into the late hours of the night. At this point, if we're going to proceed, as the way I understand we're going to proceed, I think the appropriate thing probably to do would be to call Mr. Triesenberg back to the witness stand and to ask if the council members have any questions they want to ask of him.
I'm gonna close the last public hearing. Okay, this public hearing.
I got a couple of questions, Jeff.
Sir.
And the even before the last hearing, but more particularly as it trying to find out more basic factual information about the surrounding area. The improvements on on Interstate 40 that are currently underway, could you give us the benefit of explaining what those improvements entail? As I understand it, there's the improvements from the belt line milepost roughly 300 down to Highway 70 bypass is one thing that's happening, and from there to 42 and actually a little bit south of that, just some other things happening. Could you school us on the improvements that are being undertaken?
Sure. So that project has undergone a little bit of it's been morphed over time. When I first arrived here in Garner 4.5 years ago, that project was slated to just add one lane of traffic in each direction from 42 to the bypass, or to the belt line, excuse me. Since then, the new transportation plan was adopted at the state level, and the plan was modified. They were able to, I think, put some additional funds towards it, and the basic premise was that everything would be 8 lanes from 42 to the belt line. Since they're using the design-build approach, the division office was actually able to work with the funding allotted to that particular project and help make use of some of the existing pavement that's out there. If you're down by the bypass, you know that there was additionally an extra lane. That lane was then striped out because people were widening and then having to go back. And what they realized is they were actually able to take some of the funding and resources that they were allocating towards the southern portions of the project and augment the northern portions of the project. So the final approved plans for the 40 widening from NC 42 up to the Clayton bypass, that project is actually taking the roadway from 2 lanes in each direction to 3 lanes in each direction. From the bypass to Business 70 here in Garner, it's going from 2 lanes to 4 lanes. And then from Business 70 here in Garner on up to the Beltline, it's widening from 3 lanes to 5 lanes in each direction. So in essence, you're getting 2 additional lanes of travel on I-40 from the Clayton bypass all the way into the Beltline, and an additional lane from 42 up to the Clayton bypass. So they were able to essentially squeeze out a lot more capacity out of that project by being able to reallocate some of the funds in the original plans.
All righty, look into your crystal ball. Was some of the intent to relieve capacity on 50 and widening 40?
Oh, I mean, absolutely. Everybody, the traffic model, they can look at where, the larger numbers of traffic is coming. There are certainly people who are choosing 50 today as an alternative to 40. If 40 widens up, the opposite could be true. But there's a known number of folks that are coming up from the south. And I think it also took into account the fact that you have the 2 lanes from the 70 bypass, and it really made sense as well to be able to carry those 2 lanes that they added with the 70 bypass all the way into the Beltline. But it certainly has elements of all of that involved in it.
Another thing that just recently I noticed, I thought I saw it on a map. Do you have any knowledge of anything in the planning stages for White Oak Road? I'll call it White Oak South, away from the shopping center, where it crosses 40. Are there any plans that you have been privileged to, that somewhere in the future they plan to provide access to 40 and from 40 to White Oak Road?
So 2 things come to mind. 540, the future 540 going up to Nightdale will parallel that section of 40 and will actually intersect White Oak a little bit further towards Johnston County. As part of that phase of 540, that does include an interchange with White Oak Road. There has been an interchange in the state plan for 40 in White Oak as well. At times, there's some classifications to the interstate system, and some of it determines how many interchanges you can get per mile or per number of miles. So that project always hasn't been feasible due to the proximity of 70 and 42. But today, that interchange is identified as a project in the statewide transportation plan. It has not received an earmark of funding. They have assigned a value to it of about, I think, $14 million. And that is one of the projects that we'll be looking at in the current SPOT process, which is the prioritization process that we have input into to try to get transportation projects to score for funding. So there is a project, yes, in there. It has not been earmarked for funding.
but it's a project that Garner, if we choose to participate, may have some influence on.
It could.
I've heard this statement, and you can tell me whether it's rumor or judgmental call, that whereas I think everybody's heard that DOT has planned 15 years from now improvements on Highway 50, essentially after 540 is complete. The speculation there is complete 540, reevaluate the impact to see what then the true improvements that are required on 50. Is that a reasonable statement, or could you state it better? Or is that just wishful thinking?
So I think that's probably certainly in the back of everybody's mind. But currently, the traffic models that they're running still show that there's a need probably to widen 50. So I think it's prudent for the town to keep that on our priority list, particularly since we're going through a new round of that spot prioritization process. Because as of today, 40 is not yet widened, 540 is not there. So there may be some advantages to that being higher in the priority system today, whereas if we go through the process, by then, the time the next process comes around in 2 years, 40 will be complete, 540 will be well underway, and then we'll just have to see. But I think that is a fair statement that people do have in the back of their mind, but I think at this point, we're still pushing to try to see if it will score in this process currently.
Let's look internally. I think everybody's well aware of what we're planning to do with the roundabout, and that's very localized. Hopefully, down the road, that there'll be some benefit of White Oak having access to 40 and 540. But let's come back a little bit more localized. We have internally developing a CIP that will be the foundation essentially for likely a new bond referendum in the coming years, maybe 2, 3, 4 years out. Have we got do we have any particular project that's in our CIP that has to do with transportation improvements in that area, namely Ackerman Road?
I don't believe that currently we do, except that in the transportation plan itself, it does call for an Ackerman extension through across Mahler's Creek and 250. So that is a project that we have identified and certainly could be elevated to the CIP, and if there's funding available to help with various things like design, we can certainly then try to push that project forward.
Is that the type of project that would that Campo may look at, that as potential lap funding with the but with heavy involvement by the town?
I think they could. There is one hurdle that we have to get through, and that is that currently DOT has some other kind of classification system for their roadways as to whether or not they're eligible for certain funding programs. And because today Ackerman does not actually go through to 50, it's at a slightly lesser status with DOT. But again, this is a road project that's been on our plans for a number of years. It's been in Campo's plans for a number of years as well. I think there just probably needs to be a conversation had that once it does connect through 50, from all the way from White Oak to 50, that functionality then raises it a notch that would make it eligible for LAP funding, much like White Oak or Benson.
Okey dokey, maybe this is my last one, unless something else comes to mind. It's gone kind of under the radar recently, but within the last couple of months, we adopted a policy, a new payment in lieu policy. That will impact this area on transportation issues. Could you give us an explanation or a briefing on that, just to remind us of what it entails and its implications?
Sure. So that's actually still in the process. We're finalizing it now, but we have taken it to public hearing, and it's currently going to Planning Commission for comment and then back to you for final approval. But that amendment and that program was really spurred by the interest of development in this part of town. We've gotten to a point, and I think I mentioned this last time, where all of the developments that have come in to date, when DOT looks at their traffic impacts, they're already making the intersection improvements that can possibly be made, and we've run out of those. So what this program does is it attempts to capture the impact of each individual development to the capacity of the road system in the general area. What we ask the project engineers to do is to propose an improvement, such as, in this case, adding a lane to NC 50 for a certain specified distance that would have a theoretical capacity increase equal to their impact. And then, because, let's just say it comes out to 1,500, 2,000 feet of additional lane, DOT is not going to let us just go out to Highway 50 and add that piece. It kind of goes back to the Clayton bypass example with 40. You don't want to widen and then go back down. We already have that problem with the intersection improvements they did at New Bethel. When that first opened up on 50, a lot of people were getting over thinking, oh, we got 2 lanes through, and then they get up by Bellarose and, oh, we got to go back down to 1. So we don't want to continue that kind of situation. So rather than have the developer go out and construct these improvements, they will submit a fee in lieu dollar amount for those engineered improvements, and then there will be a benefit area. And we've proposed kind of setting up 3 different funding areas in this part of town. One will be focused on Highway 50, another one will be focused on White Oak Road, and there's another one in there too somewhere. But those are the 2 most relevant to this area. And so then the town can use those funds. We don't have to use those funds to actually pay for that specific improvement. We can use it towards another improvement, such as Ackerman Road, that would ultimately benefit the whole area. So it's a dollar for dollar based on the engineer's estimate, which would have to be approved by the town engineer as well.
Thank you for that background.
Mayor. Mr. Trusenberg, at the public hearing, there were some concerns, well, a lot of concerns about what was proposed, but one of the issues that was raised was this many units, a mixture of different size homes, and also the townhomes. People were concerned, were there any restrictions for rental of any of the units, any or all of the units? Could you address Mr. Bailey with Royal Oaks and also Mr. Roberts with the Timmons Group mentioned about restrictive covenants in the HOA? And I think any HOA, any subdivision with an HOA, you can have restrictive covenants regulating whether or not any of the dwellings can be rented or not. You can cap it by a number of percentage. Could you and or Mr. Attorney Anderson address that? Because that was a concern that was mentioned. And I don't know if it's a condition that it's not in here. I know Mr. Bailey said it can be, mentioned. It can be stated in the covenants by the HOA. Can you address how that would take place?
I defer the legality to the lawyers, but okay. I do know that in the previous proposal, I went back and researched it with another project that came up, it wasn't necessarily something that they included in the covenants, but it was part of their sales, their initial sales contract, that they would agree that either no investors or only a very limited number of investors could actually make that initial purchase. But on the covenants part, I'll defer.
We got you this time.
Wearing two hats. I mean, this is convoluted proceedings, so it might get a little more confusing here. But yes, Councilman Singleton, as Mr. Triesenberg noted, when an entity goes about developing a project like this, it can have sales practices that only allow certain percentage or certain number of whatever to be acquired by investors. I don't recall hearing anything about that in the evidence that we heard last week, and so you might want to ask the applicant to come forward and talk about that a little bit. The other thing is, and this is becoming even more prevalent in HOAs, in townhomes, condos, it's not uncommon for HOAs to be developed initially with limitations, or HOAs to go back and amend their restrictive covenants years later to impose conditions that cap the number of rental units. Obviously, it's not fair to say no rental units, because somebody gets transferred, have to move, got to do something, they might want to rent that property out. But most, a lot of entities are in fact putting a percentage on it, or a number on it. And again, that's something the applicant might want to respond to.
Thank you.
Can I ask Mr. Anderson, I should have asked way down there, but these agreements or these things that are put in place, from a legal standpoint, they stand muster over time in terms of the effectiveness of them, is that right, Mr.
Oh, yes, every development that the town approves has a requirement in it that a homeowners organization be formed and covenants be put on record. We don't put those out in the hearing here. They're drawn up later and they're put on record. It's a matter of routine. And I was thinking about this last week. It may be we want to look at just putting something in our ordinance that says when you're doing townhome projects, you have to have covenants that have a certain percentage in them or something. Y'all might want to think about that when you rewrite the ordinance. But yeah, these restrictive covenants go on record. Somebody buys a property subject to restrictive covenants. Those are good until they're changed, and they're very difficult to change. It takes a very high percentage of owners. Often, I've seen some with 50%. They may be different. Of owners have to get together and vote a change in it to change something. Getting that many people to agree to anything is pretty hard. So, but obviously, the easiest thing to do is you put it in at the beginning.
They're only enforceable by the neighborhood. Town,
Absolutely, right.
they govern each other.
Jeff, how is that enforced? Or is it, how can, if council chooses to do anything like that, how do we, if it's not in the, well, it's not in the conditional use plan or in CUP or CUZ, CUP, at what point does it become effective, and what assurance do we have? Is it has to be done as a part of they may not be ready to do the restrictive covenants now. It's real early in the process. You don't do that until further down the line. But as an example, can that be required before they draw the first permit as a cutoff point, or get the plat approved? I mean, or recorded. When does that normally happen?
So the covenants are required to be submitted to our office for review prior to the first plat. But if this isn't, depending on whether or not it's a covenant item or if it's a separate item, I think we would probably just have a certification submitted with the building permit that verifies that this is not being deeded to a investor organization.
I think any follow-up questions on that will probably be to the developer and once we finish with staff.
Jeff, in reference to the fee in lieu, who will be, if Ackerman Road is proposed to be extended, and in coordination with the Capital Area Metropolitan Planning Organization is positive, and we're able to get a good look by DOT, can the fee in lieu be used possibly in the process of trying to encourage that extension from Ackerman Road to 50?
Yes, absolutely, because this would be on the 50 side of the Ackerman corridor, and so we'll draw a boundary that kind of defines the White Oak Road benefit area and the 50 benefit area, but that's, in that general area, it's pretty much as easy as just drawing a line halfway in between the two.
Has a preliminary traffic study been done to see what traffic be pulled off based upon that potential improvement, or is it too early?
It's probably too early for that. CAMPA would probably have to do a very detailed special run of the model to determine what kind of impacts that extension is expected to have. But certainly it has the potential to pull some, but I think what you'll see is that people will gravitate to whatever's nearest to them at that point. If their objective is to get to 50, if they're closer to New Bethel, they'll use New Bethel. If they're closer to Ackerman, they'll use Ackerman.
Do you know what was the impetus for the improvements to New Bethel Church Road and 50 with the additional turn lanes?
That was deemed by Congestion Management Unit because one of the things that they look for is a typical two-lane road will only have a general road capacity of about 10,000 vehicles per day. Once you put dedicated turn lanes at every possible point where there's a cross street or a drive that intersects, you don't quite double the capacity, but it goes up to about 18,000 cars per day. So as part of congestion management, in addition to the intersection improvements, they also look at those dedicated turn lanes.
What is the average daily traffic now on New Bethel Church Road?
That's a
Roughly?
good question. We don't really have any good counts at this point. They're actually out there doing counts now. So we will, as part of the 2019 program, we should be getting dates or counts that include the school traffic, because I noticed they've just been putting them out in the last week or so. But the last count we had was only like 3,700. We know that's not true anymore because that predates the high school, so.
And with the high school and the elementary school out there, did that have anything to do with those designated turn lanes? With the additional traffic being?
So that was all factored in. Each TIA that comes into us, we feed them, the traffic engineers who are doing, say, here for Oak Park West, they have to factor in every other previous development. So everything that's been approved to date is added into their traffic analysis. And so each one builds upon the next. We're not just going back to and analyzing it in a.
I think in that particular case, Elmo, that might have been predated Jeff, but I think it was the schools that prompted the improvements at New Bethel intersection with 50.
Yeah.
Good, thank you.
Yeah,
And,
absolutely correct.
and with the traffic, I understand from previous meetings that the traffic that we're now experiencing, the high density on 50 and on White Oak Road, is primarily being caused by developments that are not within Garner, or within the Garner area. There are other developments within Johnston County and various locations where individuals are trying to get to those locations coming through Garner, thus taking 50, which is within our jurisdiction, to capacity to have this congestion.
Yeah, And I think Councilmember Singleton probably knows those numbers better than I do, and I think you gave them at the last meeting, there's like 7,000 some vehicles.
The intersection of Highway 50 and Rand Road, based off 2017 traffic counts, 8,000 cars from Rand Road going to Highway 50 every day. Cleveland School Road was 8,500. Now, the 8,500 at Cleveland School, about a third of those cut down, went down 1010, but it picked up traffic as it got to Rand Road. But the substantial amount of where it peaks out of 18 to 19,000 on 50 as it gets close to Centennial Park. 14 to 15,000, that goes south of us into southern Wake County, which is not approved by the town of Garner. Even though Cleveland has a town of Garner address and zip code, the town had nothing to do with approving those units, and also into Johnston County. So the majority of the traffic is what's known as, we call it commuter traffic.
So at a capacity of 18,000 vehicles, 15,000 are being used up already before it even gets to Garner's jurisdiction.
And there is currently a plan for an improvement or replacing the bridge over Mallard Creek off of New Bethel Church Road. Yes, there is one.
Yes. I had to think which bridge you were talking about. But yes, the existing bridge on New Bethel, it is slated for widening. I believe they've finally finished the utility relocations. Part of that, and I don't know that this was mentioned at the last hearing, part of that was due to when they first came with that proposal, much like they did on Rayner Road, initially somebody had the thought that we were just going to close the bridge and replace it. So literally just close it. And the feedback from that initial proposal was no, you can't close that. That would have severe impacts. You need to build parallel to it. And so they had to increase the actual geographic scope of what they were looking at, which caused the utilities to be moved even further than what they had originally anticipated. So this way the bridge will get replaced while the existing one is still open. And so it will keep traffic.
Bill, we may have gotten a little ahead of ourselves. We have to hear from the applicant first, Bill.
Sorry?
Well, unless people continue to have questions for
I have
Mr.
one more
Triesenberg,
question.
I think Mr. Vance
I
has some more
have one more
questions.
question. And it pertains to the TIA, the traffic impact analysis that was done for this particular proposal. There are improvements proposed on New Bethel Church Road?
There are dedicated turn lanes from, I believe it was both directions into their subdivision, as well as some additional dedicated turn lanes into and out of, or into Sutton Springs. And then there's also an additional lane in the existing Oak Park coming out onto New Bethel. So yes, there's, wherever there could be, there was a need for a dedicated turn lane in that immediate vicinity. This traffic impact study triggered that.
Last question, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, another question.
Kathy,
You say you had another question, Mr. Vance?
That was my last question.
Okay.
Here's the last one.
We've seen some plans that are in the queue. One of them we thought was going to, it was originally scheduled for tonight, so we've been given the plans and we've seen the layout. And one of the things that it provides is it provides a good map of the remaining land that's available down New Bethel for development. It's something that you all see all the time, and we see it on occasion. Has the staff tried to look further down the road and has it made any attempt to assess the projected impact of not only this subdivision, other subdivisions that are yet to be built out that are already approved, subdivisions that are in the queue for looking at being reviewed? Have you thrown all of those together and tried to project what the impact would be? And if you have, can you give us the benefit of that doubt?
So
of that analysis?
To the degree that we have, it's been a fairly high level look, but it's not it's not as difficult to take that high-level look and bring it down a little lower in this particular case, because there are just a few defined alternatives for traffic getting out. But at, say, 3 to 4 units per acre, with New Bethel at a capacity of 17 to 18, Ackerman getting extended out 17 to 18, and Hebron Church Road going the other direction with 17 to 18. That capacity, and we looked at this in the comp plan process as well, is enough for what the comp plan shows as far as future land use development. There was initially some thought of perhaps some higher density up near White Oak, but very localized, that during that comp plan process actually got scaled back due to that larger analysis.
Maybe this is the last one. Tell us, for the benefit of all of us, what is PRD and how long has it been around?
So PRD is Planned Residential Development. Some folks have probably heard of PUD, which is Planned Unit Development. That's a tool that's been around in the planning world for several decades. But the PRD is really kind of a specialized version of the PUD. The PUD allows folks to master plan a mix of commercial, office, industrial, residential all together. So the planned residential district focuses just on residential. So it can be single family, it can be townhomes, it can be apartments, any kind of residential setup. The ordinance does have specific thresholds, though, that at least 25% of any PRD in Garner has to be single-family detached. So somebody can't come in and just propose townhomes and apartments. There needs to be a mix, and a mix is just loosely defined as at least 2 different types. It can be 2 different types of single-family detached. It could be single-family detached with townhomes or single-family detached with apartments. But again, we got that 25% has to be single-family, so we can't get rid of single-family detached altogether. And this has been on our books since 2003, when the current UDO was adopted. It was used to approve Bingham Station. It was used to approve Eagle Ridge back in the day. And then most recently, Country Walk subdivision on Ackerman, the Swift Creek development, which hasn't gone anywhere. That was a traditional neighborhood development, but that was approved, and then Auburn Village was also approved under that PRD district. So it's a tool that just allows for more effective master planning rather than getting things in piecemeal and trying to make sure that it all fits together. We're able to actually take a look at the whole picture, make sure the connections are where they need to be, the open space works together. And it's just, but that's how long it's been on the books, since 2003.
It's not a requirement that you've got to have 3 different types, but 3 different types are allowed.
Correct.
And I understand allowed versus required. Why would people want 3 different types?
Well, when you're talking, again, I'll kind of put my real estate hat on and try and draw from what I know from that side. When you're dealing with a project of this size, when you start getting over 100 acres, your build out starts to get longer. You know, you're looking at 5+ years, and I think as we heard from the applicant in this case, they're looking at an 8 to 10 year build out. Part of that build out scenario comes from the fact that you've got differing products that are catering to different price point clientele. So you can plan on a shorter, somewhat shorter build out time, although 8 to 10 years is still, after 8 to 10 years, 40 is going to be built and 540 is probably going to be opening. it does allow for things to move along for them at a slightly swifter pace. Whereas if they just have two product or a single product, they're only marketing to one type of customer. So they're going to have to be in the project for much longer. And the amount of uncertainty you have in the economy, I think it gives them a little more flexibility to shift gears, and when one segment may slow down, another segment for them may speed up a little bit and kind of help offset those shifts.
I had one more and it just slipped my mind. Hopefully it'll come
Sorry.
back in the next century.
Well, while you're thinking, Mr. Kennedy, let me jump in if I could. Jeff, I think it's probably been implied by all these discussions in the hearing we had before, but can you comment, since you're director of our planning department, would it be true to say that this section of our ATJ in town that we're looking at on this project tonight is going to be a prime location probably for the foreseeable future in terms of the availability of land and places for people to build and buy houses as compared to other areas of Garner? That's kind of a broad statement, and you don't have to agree with it, but we understand that as people look at our town and areas that are available and the cost of land, that area is a prime place to expect further development.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It's Garner was, I think we mentioned plenty of times that, Garner was the second largest community in Wake County back in the day. And it's fairly compact in its center, and there's not a lot of places left within the existing center of Garner to accommodate more growth. I think we've seen in the last 5 years that a lot of those little infill spots are filling in, whether it's on Aversboro Road or Vandora Springs. The growth is in our perimeter areas. That being said, we do have a lot of public utility challenges because we do sit south of the wastewater treatment plant and everything has to be pumped. So our growth areas are somewhat further limited by the fact that it takes some special utility considerations to enable that to happen. So this is one of those areas. The only other area that really exists today to a certain degree is along 401, down towards 1010 in the McCullers area. But even that, there's still some additional improvements that have to be made from a utility perspective. And then really the only other area that we have to grow into is really out in the Auburn community on the fringes of that. So yeah, if we are going to have it, this is probably one of 3 areas that can accommodate it. Because we do have the lakes and there's limited development around portions of the lakes that weren't already developed prior to that becoming a drinking water source. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, it finally came back to me. We recently asked some questions as it related to, for the council to get grounded on, quote, affordable housing. And we were trying to assess our housing stock. How does that apply? Well, I'll ask myself the question, how does that apply to what we're talking about tonight? We asked to find out what was the housing stock in Garner like. Give us I've got an interpretation, but what was one of the surprising elements that came back? And I'll explain to everybody. When we asked for it, we were just thinking, tell me how many houses of a certain value versus something else. And staff provided that. What you also provided was you provided 2 different maps of the same corporate limits, or portions of the corporate limits as examples, with pre-2017 development and post-2017 development. Tell us why you did it that way. We weren't asking for it, but that's the way, when you started interpreting the data, Tell us why you did it that way, why you presented it, and what were some of the surprising outcomes out of that?
So we wanted to, when we got that request, we wanted to be able to hopefully show you how some of the recent development proposals, starting back in even 2014, 2015, because once they're approved, it takes a while to actually get stuff on the ground. It's probably a year before the first units start to actually sell. So looking at 2017 really allowed us, that was kind of the marker point of where we started getting significant data about stuff that had been approved 5 years ago being on the ground, because we knew that that's when development, residential-wise, was starting to pick up again for Garner. And we wanted to show you, both in townhomes and single-family, how what you have been approving, how that is reflecting in the value side of things, among other variables. And so we looked at, we tried to provide you with price point breaks that kind of seemed to make some sense for the average Wake County family household of 4. And what was interesting is that by far the majority of the housing in Garner, I can't remember the exact percentages, but it was well over 50 or 60%, is all in a category that's valued at about, I think it was 168,000 or less.
53%.
53%.
Yes.
So, and again, that's your, that's your older, it doesn't say anything about the quality of the construction, that's just currently where the values lie. Let me be clear about that. And so we're filling that part of the market when those houses come up for sale.
We already got that housing in stock.
Yes. And so in the affordable housing world, they call that naturally occurring affordable housing. But where we're lacking pretty significantly in most of the price points going up from there. And so what we saw is that the things that you have been approving are beginning to fill those gaps from basically the low 200s on up. And so that was that was the bit of good news. But like I say, it was surprising just how much we're skewed right now.
I remember some of the numbers. 53% of the housing was valued at $165,000 or less. 75% of the housing was valued combined with the ones included in that. In 75 was to 53, but 75% was at 225 or less. Where the problem was prior to 17 is that the numbers were showing that we had a reduced value at 350 or 360 and above. One of the results is that with the post-17 maps, and these were color-coded, we were being dominated by the higher end ranges as opposed to the lower end, which shows that we're trying to grow ourselves out of that. We have a sufficiency of the working stock, the affordable stock. We're making progress now, as reflected in the new developments that are coming, in that the color coding it shows us that we're on the rise and developing on the higher end.
It is our
Or
average.
I should say, that's my interpretation,
Sure.
but what is yours?
Sure. I mean, at the statistical level, the average home price or the home value in Garner is going up. And that was an objective that you all have had for a while. And it fits into the whole goal and objective of the comp plan to diversify the housing stock, that we need to be bringing other things to play in Garner so that we're not just concentrated in one area.
And for the benefit of all of you that one of the reasons, in particular, I was interested in getting this information so that we would have walking around talking points. When somebody said that Garner needed to do one thing or another, it's like, here's the data, folks. Now, this is what we have, and this is where we're headed. As opposed to, Garner, you got to do more. No, the rest of Wake County can help do more. That's enough of the stump speech.
Item, a point of clarification, Jeff, you mentioned utilities were south of the treatment plant, and it has to be pumped, sewer has to be pumped, but that is the cost paid by developers. Mr. Roberts mentioned in the cost of these lots, and he's mentioned to us before in other projects he's represented too, the expensive cost per lot to put in pavement, stormwater drain, extend sewer and water, and so forth. And the cost of a lot, not just the land, but the cost to install the utilities is significant. And in some cases, they have to upgrade an existing pump station, or we approved one project a while back that has to install a new pump station, I believe, off Garner Road. So anyway, that cost is borne by the development, not the town.
It does.
Thanks for the broad range of information.
Thank you.
That's all the questions I
don't
got,
have any
Mayor.
other questions.
Yes, at this point, Mr. Mayor, the question is whether the council has any questions for the applicant.
The council, then we'll check with the audience.
The applicant.
Yeah.
Applicant.
Good evening. Rob Bailey, 410 Wayne Drive, Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm with Royal Oaks Homes, the applicant. I can start off with I guess the first question about the restrictions on the I guess it was brought up earlier by Mr. Gray or Mr. Singleton about the restricting on rentals. And we have actually we spoke to our attorney about this, and it's similar to what you said earlier, Mr. Anderson, is that we can what we're willing to do is prohibit investor sales and we will put them in our covenants. So as the declarant, we'll have control over that, and we're willing to do that over the entire neighborhood and not limit it to a percentage. Our intent for this neighborhood was never to be we're here to try to create value, and I think I mentioned that before. So we're not trying to just accelerate sales with investors. So we're willing to put that in the covenants and restrict it to owner occupied. However, we can't restrict it if what our attorney said is if it's sold down the road and someone wanted to that owner of that property, there's limitations in what the laws will allow moving forward. But we do have the ability to restrict it from when it's in the initial sale. So we can do that, and we are willing to do that.
I've got an interest in a subdivision of got all the condominiums had restrictive covenants in it, that 80%, or there was a limit at that initially you could buy it to live in, but it was intended for an older community, and of course expected mortality rates a little bit higher than hopefully what you're proposing, but there was a restriction in there that no more than 20% ultimately could be rented, and that when it changed hands, it had to go to somebody who's going to be a developer. So I'm a part of a development that's got limitations on it. And matter of fact, they went through the procedure just recently in order to up the values, or not to up the values, but to maintain the values, is to increase that 80 to 100%. And I'm not sure what the results have been, but I know going in, you had to make application to get on that list because it was limited to 20% that could ultimately go into rental. So I'm familiar with obviously state law allows that, or even tighter. But I'm wondering if that would be that could still be done. Not necessarily the whole thing, but particularly related to the condominium units, which seem to be more of the in and out variety of.
Correct. I'm not sure specifically if as I understand it, in talking to our attorney, there's no state law that prohibits the restrictions on rental, prohibiting rentals, but there's no, I guess, case law saying where they're able to enforce it if it were later on in a resale situation. I mean, we're willing to put it as a condition and work with staff within reason in terms of what state law will allow. And I guess, and to further that, I mean, we're willing to. I think we can look at it, and if we need to add it as a percentage, we can. But we're willing to state that we won't have any investor sales from the initial. We can commit to that.
Another question then.
Yes, sir.
Since the last meeting, at the end of the last meeting, you proposed to restrict the number of townhomes to, I think it was 180. Have there been any other proposed changes in your proposal to the town since that time?
So we went back and took a close look at that, and we're willing to cap, and this is what I mentioned in the last meeting, we're willing to cap the total amount of units at 580, which is with the 20% flexibility, we're allowed 660. So that's a 12% reduction. We're also willing to limit the number of townhomes to 180, which is actually a 28% reduction of what we would be allowed under the proposal now. And to add, I just wanted to speak to the density and one of the reasons we need it. And I know there was a question about why the different types of housing. And I had mentioned before that, and Jeff had touched on it, is we're trying to cater to multiple different buyers, and I had mentioned at Heather Park, a community that we just built, that there's some young families. I won't recap that, but with this type of community, we want to emphasize the value and be able to spend the money on the amenities, on the walking trails, and create the value there. So that's why one of the reasons that we need that density, and it also affords us to be able to contribute to the Highway 50, to have improved streetscapes. We've also proposed to do a berm along New Bethel. So and we were talking about sewer a few minutes ago, and there will be considerable upgrades to the pump stations that was built there at Oak Park, and we'll have to do some force main improvements as well. So there's a considerable cost there as well. So that's when we went back and looked at that 180. Those are the reasons that we need it. Is we feel like the money for the value for the town and for this community is to be able to invest it in the amenities and the open space. And that's what we feel like the buyers want.
Mr. Bailey, you mentioned streetscapes?
Yes.
Where?
So if you look on the map here where it says concrete side path, alternate sidewalk. So what we're trying to create there, if at the original Oak Park, we have a nice park area with that big roundabout. Along the right-hand side of the main road as you drive in, we want to enhance that area. We've got a meandering sidewalk. We're going to try to leave some natural, maybe some natural areas, but there'll be a considerable amount of money spent there, so that when you're driving into the community, similar to Oak Park, it gives you a sense of, you're not just looking at rows of houses and driveways. It has an open feel to it, and so that's one area we would like to spend some money. And along these pocket parks in the back, those are, and that would be an enhanced streetscape as well. There's a couple of 2 or 3 in the back to break it up.
And the purpose of the berm is to do what?
The berm along New Bethel Church Road, that was a suggestion in order to I know there's a lot of opposition from Sutton Springs and concern about when they drive out or what they're going to see from New Bethel Road. And the idea of doing the 7-foot berm with additional enhanced landscaping on top of that was based on the elevations. The property drops the highest point's up at New Bethel, and it drops further. You go back towards the down towards the back half of the property, and so that would help mitigate any of the sight of the houses and give it more of a private feel from New Bethel Road. And we felt like that was something that would help with the Sutton Springs homeowners there and their concerns.
Can you comment just quickly on the large green area in the upper quadrant, I guess? I think we talked about that briefly, but just what is that?
So where the trails are?
Yes.
Okay, so there's an old farm pond that is in the center. There's a big circle around it. Mm-hmm. That area, we're gonna rebuild. Rebuild that pond, and then do a circular walk path around that, and then have some interconnectivity to some of the stub streets on the back half of the property, giving access to those sections, as well as accessing the greenway down to the east side of the property. We are also at the roundabout, in between the roundabout and the area I was just speaking about with the pond. That's where we're going to have the main amenity area, which would be the swimming pool area, and so. What we're thinking, when you drive in, we want to be able to have the clubhouse would be the focal point on the other side of the roundabout, and then we'll have the swimming pools to the right of that. And so you're able to take that, what I call an active amenity area with the swimming pools, and tie that into the walking trails. And you'll be looking back over that pond, and then that green space where the protective areas around that riparian buffer. Yes, sir.
We normally think that the denser development, smaller lots, closer homes, that's what we blame the millennials for this. Is there another target age group that you have in mind for the subdivision?
Yeah, so over in Oak Park right now, so we're looking at doing an age-targeted section, and right now we're looking at that front, I guess the darker blue to the, that's right, in that area. We're doing some studies on that to try to figure out if that is, if we want to have a restricted or an age-targeted area. I'll take the word restricted out, it would be targeted. So we're doing some research on that right now, looking at some different products. But what Jeff was saying earlier, it being an 8 to 10 year project, we don't necessarily want to commit to that right now in terms of that being I don't want to commit that to you because the schools are right there, and we feel like this might not be the right area for it, but we're not sure. We're going to let the market tell us that. And right now at Oak Park, we've got, we have 30% of our single-family detached product is master down. So you do have a mixture of the folks that would be in the age-targeted area.
You mean us older folks? You really mean us older folks?
There's
it's okay.
Call it as a
there's other names
older than me, right? Yes, sir. So yeah, we have we're going to let the market dictate it. We are looking at it strongly, and but we're not in a position right now to commit to a certain section of that. And I feel like it's really based on the proximity to the schools, but I think you'll have a mixture of it. I think I told you all last time when I spoke that I live in the location I live in Raleigh, I live on a 5,000 square foot lot. I have retirees on either side of me. And the neighborhood is predominantly younger families. And I think I had mentioned that our community promotes a social environment and lifestyle, and that's what people want now. And so we want to give ourselves flexibility to have folks that make that lifestyle choice, that want to necessarily, they want a ranch style. They may be baby boomer generation, but they want to live in alongside younger families.
Would your HOA, is this situation where it'll maintain the yards, or is that left up to the individual?
That if we do an age-targeted section specific to that, then yes, it would maintain. We would do the maintenance of the yards. The townhomes will certainly be done. That whole area, that includes the exterior and all the common areas around it. And if we do designated an age-targeted area, yes, that will have lawn maintenance.
I'm going to leave the public hearing open, but we're going to take about a 10-minute recess. To speak, and we will allow a couple, 3-4 minutes, or 3 minutes, if anybody wants to speak. Go to the podium, state your name and address. You may speak very shortly.
Let me ask you a question first, Mr. Mayor. Is Mr. Bailey finished making his comments?
No.
Because he was midstream when we took a break. I didn't know if he had a thought he was getting ready to.
Yeah. I just wanted to just reiterate that, just to clarify that if with the restrictions on rentals, if we're willing to put a restriction on a percentage for the townhomes on moving forward, as long as it meets state law, and we'll
Consistent
invest
with state law.
That's right. So we're willing to agree to that as well.
Could you see if you could put some of that in, get it in words that we, if we choose to use it? I'm not sure which way this is going to go, but can you, looks like there's going to be some further discussion, so could you talk with Jeff?
Okay.
Get that written.
Right,
We
thank
have
y'all.
some questions
Oh,
on this end of the dais.
Yeah, I just have one question. If the permit is granted, which part will you begin constructing first?
So two things, the entrance, the main entrance on New Bethel Road, the plan is to take that road all the way down to the roundabout, and then to build part of the section off to the right to grab some of those units, and then also connect over to the left back into the existing, go down some, back to my right. Yep, there you go. Connect into the old, or to the existing Oak Park. So we would grab a section of the lighter blue, and then we would also have a section of the townhomes that would be built, probably that U in the middle, and with the road infrastructure so that we'll meet the safety requirements. And then that way we have our main entrance, we have a second access point, and then we'll be able to build the amenity and create that streetscape I was talking about on the right-hand side right off initially. Is that?
I think that was mainly it, yeah.
All right. Thank y'all.
Mr. Bailey, before you go, let me give you this piece of paper, and then I'll explain to the council what it is. Mr. Mayor, a lady, Miss Kelly Kennard, who spoke at the last hearing, handed the clerk some documents, some copies of an email that she said she tried to send that didn't go through, and she would like to ask that that be passed out to the council. And since we're trying to be sort of like a court, I'll give Mr. Bailey a copy so you can have a look at it. Okay. And we'll have an opportunity to respond to anything if he needs to.
Before this is
Mr.
opened up, Mayor, can I also make a suggestion? If we could start with, if it's going to be opened up to, back to the public, can we start with folks that have not had a chance to speak yet and let them speak first? Still with, since we've had several hours of it, is to let them speak, but to at least limit it to the 3 minutes, and then followed by the folks that want to add something new that's previously spoken.
Everybody hear that?
Mr. Attorney, do you have one more copy of this document?
He can have it.
I can give you, yeah, we can get another one back.
Mr. Anderson, explain to the people who know what we're going to try to do.
Well, I think, yeah, I don't know if they heard you all over the microphones, what the council's saying they want to try to do is, I mean, we don't want to stay here till midnight hearing the same thing over and over 100 times, obviously, if y'all can respect that and understand that. But if someone who has not spoken last time would like to speak, we're going to try to do a 3-minute cap on it. And if somebody who did speak last time is just absolutely dying to say something and can say something new and different from what they said last time, we'll do the same thing. And basically what we've done in the past on things like this is encouraged people to have a spokesman. If it's HOA, they have a spokesman, and 20 people can adopt what they say. But just y'all appreciate that while we want you to have your right to speak, we don't want to hear the same thing over and over and over again. So, and we'll try to run a 3-minute clock. Nobody's going to cut you off mid-sentence, but if y'all can kind of play with those rules, that would probably help us.
And the 3 minutes is not arbitrary. It is adopted in our policy and procedures
Sure is.
at public meetings. It
We've done
started
it-
years
we've done it for
ago, and it's
years.
been updated and updated and updated, but the 3 minutes limit, we're flexible with that. But I think tonight we're going to be a little more rigid. So is one of the managers going to keep the time? With an attorney or someone?
Got a
Okay,
clerk.
all right.
Okay, we're going to start with Mr. Lee. Are you ready?
I spoke.
Violated.
I want to be out of turn, but I would like to speak again.
Go to the podium, please.
Okay.
So much for that.
My name is Paul Alexander Lee Jr., and I live at 8345 Hebron Church Road. And I got less than 3 minutes. Mr. Mayor, council members, town staff, and guests. Again, my name is Paul Alexander Lee Jr., and my address 8345 Hebron Church Road, Garner. I believe this project is the most dense rural project for the amount of land that can be used that the town of Garner may have ever considered. I'm not against growth and development. We know people are coming, but there's a way, I think, in which can be done. But what can be drawn on paper may not be logical, or may not be a logical solution that are Garner's needs and desires. I believe that one purpose of these large projects could be that Garner needs affordable housing. I believe that was spoken to you a little bit earlier. But Garner already has affordable housing, at least as far as a lot of the Wake County realtors are concerned. If somebody comes to Wake County as a prospective buyer and they go to North Raleigh, they go to Cary, they go up toward Wake Forest, and their budget can't afford these locations, the realtors direct them to Garner because you can get more for your money in Garner than you can in any of these other places. And that's the same as saying Garner has affordable housing. Thank you for your time and the hard decisions that you make for the citizens of Garner.
Thank you. Next.
I signed it for you. What's your street address?
Take your name.
Tim Holton, 411 Longview Street, one of those naturally occurring affordable housing homes in Garner. We love it. It's a sturdy, classic brick ranch house. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak to you again this evening. A couple of weeks ago, I attended the town council meeting, and I was really here just to observe it. The time before that, I came up here and I spoke to you about my feelings about Garner, and tonight, I'm going to try not to be quite so long, but in Garner, we love our peoples, and I am here to add my support, and I hope it's helpful. 2 weeks ago, this place was packed. First, I think to honor Mr. Kennedy and thank you for your service. Second, it was residents airing their passionate concerns about this Oak Park West proposal. This place was pretty electric. Not quite as many people here tonight. Residents were cheering other residents as they aired their concerns. It was really incredible. Outside of a few, what seemed to be hand-picked speakers favoring the proposal, when it came to the actual people of Garner, there was not a one who seemed to favor the plan. That evening, the proposal was being presented. There was quite a bit of discussion around something called the Garner Forward Plan. After the meeting, I asked a couple of residents what they knew about this Garner Forward Plan, and the answer was essentially nothing. It's the first they'd heard of it. Now, there seems to be a major discrepancy between Garner's current residential zoning densities with room to breathe and what is being proposed by the Oak Park West folks. The builder's justification for these pretty incredible changes in density appears to be that Garner Forward Plan. So I searched to see what it was about. And it's a substantial document that it was created a few years back before my wife and I discovered and fell in love with Garner. My sense is that a great deal of energy and time went into creating that document, even if average folks don't really know much about it. What struck me from that Garner Forward Plan, and stated time and time again, is the idea that of, quote, building on and conserving the existing character. It is the first and primary principle of that whole report. It's in there over and over again. And this very principle, I believe, is one of the primary concerns that residents feel Oak Park West and others are missing. So I wondered to myself, and I think a lot of people here probably do, if the character has long been about properties with room to breathe, then how on earth did Garner Forward Plan come to a place where it would consider zoning densities that are so much higher? The only thing I could really come up with is that the Garner Forward Plan is offering a window of opportunity, not a guarantee, for developers to add units to the land. However, to do so, they must bring their A game. They need to look at Garner and its character and design projects that stand out in a very positive way. They need to bring quality architecture, quality design, and quality materials. So what are some of the characteristics that make Garner what it is?
Sir, you're about to wrap up.
I'm pretty darn close.
Please, we're trying to do the 3-minute limit.
I'm going to say it again, room to breathe. Even with higher densities, there's got to be room to breathe. And I think in this proposal, thanks to, a kind of a flood issue, there is. Speaking of breathing, trees are a big part of the character of Garner. And I think, again, given the landscape, we've got that. But we're about brick and mortar. Mid-century homes with sturdy, long-lasting materials. We're about porches where you can actually sit down on the porch with somebody and have a beer, have a sweet tea, have a cheer wine. We have lots and lots of cars in Garner. It's got a long history of it. You're more likely to see a household with 3 or 4 or more vehicles than one. And oftentimes they're large vehicles. A one-car garage layout, or shall we maybe call it a storage closet, is not at all in keeping with the character of Garner. Trains, steel, and lumber that make those railroads that form this town are key to the character. As I talked about before, that downtown water tower, amazing. It's a work of art. Diversity. We are diverse peoples. Cookie cutter does not cut it in Garner. It should not. It seems to me builders and developers of late want to have their cake and eat it too when they come here. They seem to want large pieces of land to do large projects that offer lower grade materials, lower grade aesthetics, and designs, lower grade functionality like one-car garages, and they want the high density. It can no longer work this way in Garner. Garner is gorgeous. The people of Garner don't want this kind of thing. From now on, when developers come to Garner, they need to bring not just their A game, but their A+ game. The C and D games, the average stuff, must be a thing of the past and not a part of the future of Garner going forward. Thank you. I know
Thank
that
you.
took a long time. But
Thank you. Anyone else? Good evening.
My name is Joseph Hayes. I live at 116 Traybridge Lane in Sutton Springs. I spoke last week, so I'm going to keep my comments relatively short. I want to thank you for the ability to speak to the council again tonight. I want to point out a couple things. Most of us who have spoken in opposition of this are not against development in Garner. We just have a question about the density of what you have proposed. I know that the Garner Forward plan is based on the character of Garner, but we haven't defined what that is, and we certainly haven't defined how this project adds to the character of the town. Our main goal is less density. We don't want an R9. We certainly don't want this. I think what we need is larger lots. And the developer has sold us this plan as being the most logical plan that they can come up with. But this plan is someone's decision, someone's interpretation of what is there, someone's decision about what is good for that piece of property. Royal Oaks knows how to build larger houses. They know how to make money. They know how to do it on larger lots. I point out that they are the builder of Portofino and Cary. Portofino is a very nice development. I've been in there in that development myself in Clayton. I'm sorry, not Cary. It's in Clayton. They have a house in there that sells for starts price about $450,000, and that's on 3/4 of an acre or bigger. They could have brought that kind of plan to this site. We have approved in our town over and over and over what I would define as the same concrete slab house, 2,200 to 2,600 square feet, over and over and over. We have never approved anything larger that I can think of in the last 2 years or 3 years. I've been coming to this council ever since the first development was proposed at Clifford Grove. I've been here in opposition to Clifford Grove. I've been here in opposition to Oak Park because they are so tight. I don't know if anybody has been through some of these developments that are R9, but if you think an R9 is tight, this is going to be horrible. This is going to be very tight. This is going to be claustrophobic. And I don't think anybody in this room really understands how tight, how big this development is. What we really expect is we expect that we're going to be able to build in Garner, but not on the swampland that's in the upper left-hand corner of this development plan. Let us not count the stuff that is unbuildable as part of their density, and let's just calculate their density on what is actual buildable in town.
Thank you.
Question for you, sir.
My name is Joseph Hayes.
Joseph, thank you, sir.
Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
Go back to the microphone. Are you familiar with Rosemore?
Rosemont.
Rosemore.
No.
It's on Buffalo Road.
Mm-hmm.
It's a subdivision that's been in place for about 12 years, 15 years.
Mm-hmm.
It has acre-plus lots. 6 or 8 years ago, or maybe even 10 years ago, the asking price of the lot, $125,000. Houses built on it, 4,000 square feet.
Mm-hmm.
Just wondering if you're familiar with it. There's a lot of vacant lots there.
Mm-hmm. I haven't been there. I've been in Portofino.
No, this is in Garner.
Okay.
I'm just pointing out that we would really like to see the rest of that subdivision build out. No more than 35 to 40% of that subdivision has been built out. I wish the market was there. I'm just wondering if you had seen it so that you understand that there are some, if people were wanting the open lots, there's a subdivision that's got them. That's the whole
No, I
point.
haven't been.
Anyone else? If you may.
Hi, I'm Charlotte Davis, and I live at 230 Pecan Harvest Drive in Sutton Springs. And it's not that we do not want your subdivision to come. We'd like to work with you. Our concern mainly is we're already a pass-through subdivision for Bingham Station, and other people are cutting through because of lack of connection to 50. And the traffic flow is becoming dangerous in our neighborhood. And you're going to put the entrance from your subdivision directly across from us. What do you think they're going to do? They're going to cut through Sutton Springs in front of my house and other houses. Our children are, we have a lot of homeschool kids, and they take their recess breaks. I'm retired Wake County Public School for 31 years, and I know it's great to fill the schools. It's great to have growth. But I do think this reminds me of Apex. I worked in the Apex school. It's a great community. I'm not so sure we're ready for this, especially New Bethel Church Road. I meet those high school drivers every day, and I know what's going to happen, unfortunately. That road is not prepared to handle it. I see it. We've already had some accidents, even in our own HOA property, from that. So we would like to work with you, maybe, if you would think about not putting the entrance directly across from us. Work with us and not say that, we don't want you to think we don't want you to come. But I think we met as a group. Some of us have left because we didn't think we'd get the opportunity to talk. So we met at our pond, and we said we'd like to work with you. So if you're willing, and somehow can we get some information to you, there are many of us that would like to work with you. But we really would like to reconsider the density as well. Have you been through Sutton Springs? It's a beautiful neighborhood. Something like that. Our houses are 325 to maybe 4. We love it there, but we don't love the traffic we're getting.
Sutton Springs is one of the most beautiful
Isn't it awesome?
subdivisions in Garner. All
But
types of venues.
We have had confrontations from people speeding through our neighborhood. It's quite scary. We don't know, I mean, literally confrontations. Garner PD has been wonderful coming and cruising our neighborhood to try to make it less that pass through. But that is going to ruin our neighborhood or be dangerous.
I want to mention to you, Ms. Davis, I mentioned to a couple of Sutton Springs residents at the last meeting that we do have a traffic calming policy to help cut through traffic. So if your HRA would like to get together and talk to our staff, they can tell you about the policy, if that's something y'all want to consider.
Absolutely.
Help slow,
But also, we'd like to consider the growth or an entrance or a left or right median. I'm not sure. I'm not a traffic person. I'm not an engineer. But I was in the Apex schools for 18 years, and I saw they just kept letting people come and come and come and come. And it's a nice place to live, don't get me wrong, but I'm born and raised right here. I went to Garner schools and Fuquay schools, so I'm local born and bred. Not many of us left. So I welcome growth. I want our schools to grow. I want our test scores to go up, and they are. And Garner has been one of those towns that has needed that in the schools. People would move here, but they'd take their kids elsewhere because the test scores were low, and I know that. And so I think this is good, but I love the whole aspect of Sutton Springs, and I just wish that maybe you guys could look at that a little differently. Have you been in our neighborhood? Okay.
Just so you'll know, Ms. Davis, you aren't the only one who's experiencing some cut-through traffic. I live in a very nice neighborhood that's not too far from the area that Mr. Kennedy mentioned. And there's a lot of new traffic is coming, I think, mostly from Johnson County.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's part of the deal. So I wanted you to know at least one council member doesn't live in an area that's devoid of that.
Right. We just didn't want the target on our backs that we didn't want them to
Understand.
grow. I've been in your homes. My mother's 85 years old. 540's taken her home. I looked at a home in your subdivision, a ranch plan, thinking my 85-year-old mother might be okay there, but I don't know. So I'm just saying, I am very concerned about our neighborhood already, and with this and what has already been approved, I just think it's going to be a highway on Sutton Springs and Pecan Harvest Drive. So, thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else? Can't say we didn't give you time to talk.
What was that?
Said they can't say we didn't give them time to talk.
Oh.
Time.
I'm Kelly Kennard, 100 Sutton Springs. I delivered that letter. I'm hoping that that you're able to speak to some of those points and try, if the vote is happening tonight, try to get some of those points addressed and agreed to tonight if you cannot postpone this meeting or this vote to another night. The burn situation would be a no-go for me because I don't want to be looking at those homes. My husband's office is on the side of that. The noise of this big turn-in, we don't need that. We need privacy, the privacy that we came for. So if you could just look to some of those points, hopefully the members of this council will agree to table this along with you so that we don't have a vote, so that we have a time for Sutton Springs and other communities that might be affected by this to sit with you. A hand wasn't reached out. You said last meeting that you're very good at reaching out to communities that would be affected. You weren't. Nobody has reached out to our community. So I think that's where we stand at Sutton Springs. It's not that we don't want construction. We just want responsible construction that affects everybody well. Thank you.
Anyone else? Mr. Attorney, where are we?
Well, if there's no one else to be heard, I don't know if there was sort of an invitation to see if the developer wanted to restate the proposed conditions. I don't know if those have been stated sufficiently or not, or Mr. Triesenberg may have conferred with him.
So in your updated staff report for today, we did incorporate the two conditions that were offered up at the last meeting. So your zoning condition number 17 is that a 7-foot tall landscape berm shall be installed along the project's frontage on New Bethel Church Road. And then we also, let me see where it's at.
Mr. Triesenberg, clarification on that.
Yes.
The berm, explain what the 7-foot tall means. What is going to be the 7-foot tall?
So 7 feet tall above the existing grade as it is today.
The dirt is what's where the dirt will be, then the plants will be planted on top of that.
On top and along the sides. And that is an 80, at its narrowest point right here, this is an 85-foot wide buffer already. So they'll be adding a 7-foot berm to that 85-foot plus wide area, which at most you might see the upper portions of some of those homes in the back, but you won't see the first floor.
So 17 is listed in our, about the 7-foot tall berm shall be installed along the project's frontage. That's in the current, that's in the current ordinance, or the ordinance that's before us, 2019-3991. It's on page 30.
Page 37.
Oh, no, 58.
Perfect, yeah.
I'm not sure what it is of the development proposal,
Yeah.
but of our text, it's page 58.
Okay.
And now, is there any new language regarding the rental?
Before I get to that, the other one that was modified was condition number 3, which is that the maximum density shall not exceed 3.1 dwelling units per acre, with a maximum of 580 dwelling units, of which no more than 180 shall be townhomes. And so if you flip from the zoning conditions to the special use permit conditions.
Can you give us a page number, Jeff?
So I'm actually looking in the staff report, not the, well, and you won't.
57.
Yeah, you don't have a permit
Page
yet.
57.
What I would propose is that we modify, excuse me, I gotta get there.
I don't see a permit in here. Treasenberg, I don't think there's a permit in the agenda.
Right, there's not. That's something we have to draft afterwards, but the conditions are listed in the staff report. I'm showing them on page 46 and 47. And that is condition number 3. 3B, prior to recordation of the first final plat, documents establishing a homeowners association and restrictive covenant shall be submitted to the Garner Planning Director for review. And what I would propose is that we modify that one to include language that says upon initial sale, there will not be any sales to investors, and that any resale subsequent to that will be limited to 20%.
See, resales or rentals?
Resales for rental would be limited to 20% at any one time. I think that grabs everything I've heard so far.
So just one more time, would you repeat the numbers after the developer said he would reduce the number of townhomes? I think I made notes here, but the number of houses, the number of townhomes.
Yep, zoning condition number 3 would cap the density at 3.1 units per acre, which would allow for the 580 dwelling units total. And of those 580, 180 would be capped for townhomes.
180 for townhomes.
And then zoning condition number 17 and special use permit condition 3B.
Question, Jeff. Mrs. Kennard mentioned the idea of displacing the opposing driveways or entrances. Is there any validity to that? Are there turning lanes there proposed, and what kind of turning lanes are proposed for not only Oak Park West, but also for Sutton Springs, that will take advantage of the fact that they are opposing each other to make it and why are they currently aligned across from each other?
So DOT does have minimum separations for intersecting streets. I don't think it's feasible from the alignment of the existing New Bethel to have their road come out anywhere but directly across. It's an existing point where traffic can enter, and to the degree that they can, DOT does not want to introduce new points of entry. That just creates more confusion and possibilities for accidents. So they generally will keep things directly opposing each other. And I think it's further complicated by the fact that you're in a curve, and so those points of entry are very defined. You can't just put it, you got to keep it where there's adequate visibility. So usually that outside, inside part of the curve is where you do that. But to that end, these are, what you see on the screen now are the dedicated right-hand and left-hand turn movements. Just to recap, 100-foot exclusive right-hand turn lane on eastbound New Bethel, so going towards the school, at the new entrance across from Sutton Springs Drive. So that's actually turning into their development. Stripe a 100 exclusive left-hand turn lane, again going the same direction towards the high school from 50. So there'll be an exclusive right into Oak Park West and an exclusive left into Sutton Springs. Then coming back on the westbound side of New Bethel, there will be a 50-foot exclusive left into Oak Park West. But yeah, that's one of the first things that we generally look at, and there really wasn't any other option for access, but
But we needed that explained.
Jeff, have we covered you enough?
I'm good.
Dennis, where we go? Where do you want us to go, to bed?
Mr. Councilman Marshall has something.
Well, I would hope that maybe before we go to a motion that we would have a chance to do some summary observations or whatever. I don't know if other council members want to do that,
So
but
we haven't closed the hearing yet, I don't think, Mr. Mayor. Time to close the hearing. Yeah, excuse me, Mr. Marshall, you're on.
Well, I'd like to say to those of you who are here that of the years that I've been on this council, decisions of this type are some of the most, maybe it's a little dramatic to say heart-rending, but they're difficult. I know many of you who are here, who have spoken here this evening, I see in grocery stores and around town, so we can't hide from you, and we won't. When I moved to Garner 31 years ago, it was a considerably different town than what it was now. In fact, the neighborhood that I live in, I'm sure, was a wooded area that had deer in it because years later, after it was developed, we still see deer come into our backyard. So for some of those of you who are newer and pining for the days when we have lots of space, it's just not the same. Even though Garner is a lovely town, and it is now, and it will continue to be. Even where I live now, just a half a mile down the road, there are townhomes. The land has been cleared, and an area that my wife and I usually walk in the evening down a sidewalk that was once wooded is now almost completely cleared, and there will be townhomes going there. Whether or not I like those townhomes, I would like to think that perhaps moving into those in future days will be people who, of the next generation, will probably be some of the town leaders. So I'm going to view that as something that is positive. The type of homes that people want to live in now obviously have changed since the days that I bought my first single-family home and raised a family in them. The other thing I would say is, I don't know how many of you receive or are familiar with something called the Triangle Business Journal. I receive those on a regular basis, and in the very recent issue is a nice article in there about the town of Fuquay-Varina and the boom that they're having out there. They're growing like crazy. And so they're abutting our southern border. So we can't stop what they're doing. We can and should, in my view, be sensitive to what towns are doing around us and making sure that we're not being overcome by those who are more aggressive than we are. Certainly to our east, Johnson County, likewise, there are lots of homes being built there. We can't control that. And so that's where a lot of the traffic's coming from. On a project like this, it's going to take 8 to 10 years to build out. I'd like to think that there will be some road improvement during that span of time, such that some of the concerns that are expressed here now will be attended to. I believe that will happen. And so, you know, to those of you from Sutton Springs, you do have a lovely neighborhood. I've been out there on several occasions. So while I appreciate your concerns, I do think that these kinds of housing projects are something that we have to seriously consider. I don't think we're giving away the quality of our town by considering these these types of things. And so I'll defer to others to make any comments, but in my conflicted state, I'm inclined to approve this. That's all, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much.
What else?
How about you, Kathy?
I'd like to say to my Sutton Springs neighbors, I also live right off New Bethel Church Road as well. And I understand the pressures of what you're going through because I experience it as well. And understand that when I first moved to Garner, it was not like it is now. And one thing that I said that I would like to do is be a part of positive growth within the town of Garner. And I really hope that I've kept that promise to be a part of positive growth within Garner. The impacts of traffic that we're feeling now are really not because of what is going on in Garner, but because of surrounding municipalities. And the area is changing. It is changing. And it's going to change with us or without us. With us putting forward a comprehensive plan to help to shape that growth, or not putting a plan and we get things pushed on us. So I believe that it's imperative that we do continue with our comprehensive growth and be proactive in shaping that growth so that it be beneficial for our prosperity long after we are gone.
Well, Mr. Mayor, at the last meeting, I expressed some concerns about the project, and no one can say that I'm an anti-growth person. I voted for Sutton Springs, Oak Park, Clifford Grove, Foley Station, Country Walk, South Garner High School, Bryan Road Elementary. We hope one day Bryan Road Middle School, and also help to hold the feet of the Wake County School Board, hold their feet to the fire to get Bryan Road repaved. However, in this case, I think the density is a little on the high side. I have concern about it. I expressed my concern last time. I think it's too dense, and I won't support the rezoning or the CUP on this particular project because I think the numbers are just too high. There's concerns with traffic. I understand all that, and people say, well, build the road first, then you build the house. It just does not work that way. You don't see anybody building a football stadium or a baseball stadium and say, well, we'll get the team after we build it. Or you don't go, build your curb and gutter and your driveway and your foundation of your house and let it sit there for 4 or 5 years and build the house. It just doesn't work that way. And developers, you can't build it one lot at a time anymore. As Mr. Roberts stated at the last meeting, cost per lot is just too high. You have to go in and do large phases to be cost efficient. But again, I think the density in this one is just a little too high. And I won't support either motion.
I've raised a lot of questions tonight, and for my benefit, and hopefully it provided a perspective for those that were wanting to hear some factual information. One of all of the comments we've heard, they've been pretty much based on two areas. One is density and the other is traffic. I share some of your same concerns about density, but the first thing I'll tell you is I'm not necessarily the person that's, I bought into a dense area not too long ago, and that's just where I'm headed. I need somebody that's going to help take care of the yard and exterior. I've had more concerns about building materials that other people have mentioned, and that or at least a couple of people have mentioned. One of the things that I've learned is we cannot legislate building materials. And the reason that I have that particular concern is because of my age. And people my age, when they were growing up, your ideal was to get you a brick house that showed that you had arrived, you had something substantial was going to last a while. But we were more used to staying in one place and working for one employer as I did. I've worked for 37 years with the same one, and never had, I moved around in Garner, but I stayed in Garner. We tried legislating price points several years ago, and you might not be aware of that, but we failed miserably. We ran off development. It exited Garner. We had to invite them back and be a little bit more open to development. But the one I paid probably as much attention to as any, and when I say legislating materials, we tried to legislate the size of the house, what you put on, how you built the house, and we were not going to legislate price points. The market was going to demand that. And I can give you a prime example. Nobody is building the size house that I live in an all brick house today. It's not being built in Garner. You might find one or two random. I would really like to see some of those built so that one day when my children sell the house that I'm in now, that it sells for a higher price. Unfortunately, that's not what's selling. But that's my problem and not yours. State law does not allow us to legislate materials. We just cannot do it. But when it comes back to road improvements, and that's where probably as much, it's when it gets down to safety, that's where the rubber hits the road, no pun intended. And part of the discussion earlier tonight was to give us all the benefit of the doubt that Garner is not ignoring traffic conditions in Garner. This town council is not ignoring them. But we don't lead by building the roads and saying, I hope y'all will come and use this road. Road construction lags development. It just simply does. And nothing I'm going to tell you is going to change your mind. Don't expect it to, but it gives you a perspective. I look at some of this and what's going on in Garner through the lens of a 75-year-old, 76. That's not what people are catering to. My lens is shaded because of my age. The coming market is a different age group. That's where the majority of people that are buying is certainly a different age group and a different mindset. But back to the road improvements. We talked about the road improvements that we know are in place or in progress, will be in place. Those that are planned and funded but haven't started, those that are planned but haven't been funded, and those that are in mindset that this council is going to have to address on road improvements down the road. They cannot be ignored. Road improvements are going to be one of the major two expenditures that this town will be involved in for the next 25 years, at least. The other one's going to be parks. But primarily, roads are always, transportation is going to always be a leading source of challenge or a leading challenge with respect to how we spend our dollars. But I hope you gained at least some appreciation for the fact that there's been some evaluation from the inside out and from the outside in. From a global perspective, a lot more capacity is being built by DOT by 540 and 40. Closer to home, we're ready to start construction, or next spring it'll start construction on the roundabout. Fee in lieu addresses another way to help improve 50 or Ackerman. Ackerman is not on an active project list, but it's ready to be put on a CIP. No, it's going 50. New Bethel Church Road is going to be a busy road. There is absolutely no doubt about it. But if there's one thing that you do know, that's going to be a real focal point of this council. It cannot be ignored. It won't solve your questions today, nor will these houses be built. You'll be lucky if I think the developer will be lucky if the first house is sold, well, excuse me, it won't be occupied a year from now. The first house in this subdivision will not be occupied a year from now. Hopefully, by the time the roundabout, which will only help a portion of it, it's not an answer to New Bethel, but it's an answer to a portion of the area, is going to precede the majority of the development that's taking place out there, or the remainder of the development that's in the queue. I do not live there. I do not face the same situation. But I can tell you, when I moved to Garner 47 years ago, I moved for the same reason that a lot of people are here, is because I could buy more house for less money. Maybe I was in the affordable market, but I could buy a house I could buy the same house and more for 25% less. There's a lot of people probably the same way. That's who we are. We're trying to grow ourselves out of it, and I look to this subdivision and others. It's going to help us move out of that. I believe it. Now, some say we're going to depress the values in Sutton Springs. I look at it that you're in a prime location with the bluffs. You can be on a rise. You can be level. You can have you've got housing situations where you've got basements and outlets to lakes. You've got a variety. If you had all of Garner was the same thing, you'd have more of a problem selling your house. You're in a unique position. It's one of the prettiest subdivisions there is in all of the town. You're very fortunate, and it's only going to get better. Hopefully there's going to be a market. There will continue to be a market, and I hope there is for yours, and I hope some of them will still want to buy my house as well. So we're not ignoring the transportation. It's on our minds. It's already being planned for. We know it's got to come in the next bond referendum. If I had my preferences, I'd make it look a different way, but I don't run the market. And the market is what's driving the developers, not necessarily, the developer's not going to say, you're going to buy this. They're responding to what the public's buying. Please understand it. Doesn't change your mind. But I think one of the things that's happened in the last couple of weeks, particularly with respect to some of the transportation things that we were educated on tonight, I think council has reached a point, and they have their own thoughts about it, but we're not going to make a decision based on emotion. It's going to be based on an understanding of the situation that exists, whether we want to embrace it or not. But hopefully emotion it's been removed from it, and it's based on a pragmatic decision. That's enough preaching from me.
Okay. UDO 1903 over through that. All right, let's call for a motion on that.
I move, Mr. Mayor, that the town council accept staff statement regarding zoning consistency with the Garner Forward Comprehensive Plan detailed in Section 5 of the staff report as our own, and I therefore move further that the town council adopt ordinance number 2019-3991 approving the rezoning request PDZ 1903 as it is reasonable and in the public interest, because it will likely allow adequate buffers and usable open space that helps preserve and protect adjacent housing stock, allow the development of an appropriate density of housing in the area in which it is located, and allow for the conservation and preservation of natural features and green space to promote recreation opportunities.
Is the
Second.
motion, is there a
Second motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
No.
Madam Secretary, poll the board.
Mayor Pro Tem Marshburn,
Aye.
Councilmember Behringer,
Aye.
Councilmember Kennedy,
Aye.
Councilmember Singleton,
No.
Councilmember Vance.
Aye.
Passes 4-1. Nightclubs,
No, we have to do the
Conditional use permit.
DUP, yeah.
all right, let's get a motion on that.
Regarding the conditional use permit, I move that the council accept the staff statements regarding plan consistency with section 7 of the report as our own and find the application meets the 10 permit criteria in section 3.114.d and therefore approve PD MP 19-03 Oak Park West with the 3 standard conditions. And the, Jeff, how many special conditions? 9 special conditions, site-specific conditions to be listed on the permit that'll be prepared by staff.
Second.
Motion made and second. All in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
No.
Madam Secretary, poll the board.
Mayor Pro Tem Marshburn,
Aye.
Councilmember Behringer,
Aye.
Councilmember Kennedy,
Aye.
Councilmember Singleton,
No.
Councilmember Vance.
Aye.
Motion passed 4-1. Now, are we at the nightclub? Let's call it up.
To the next agenda item.
Okay.
Yes, sir, we're at the text amendment. Yes.
Good night, y'all. They won't do that.
Oh, they don't very well behaved. I was very impressed. Very well behaved.
We've seen hundreds of these houses.
A lot.
Appreciate it. Good thing.
This thing should come.
Appreciate it. Thank you, sir. Tickle him.
This is probably.
I'm trying to figure out.
He will stand up for you. Oh, no. When did Matthews get here? Okay, Jeff.
Okay. Good evening again, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. This is the public hearing for UDO 1903.
Let me open the public hearing.
Yep.
Go ahead.
We just went over this at your work session last week, so there's not a whole lot new, but for the benefit of the audience, this is very identical to a text amendment that you all entertained earlier this calendar year to add the bar, nightclub, tavern use to the central business district in select areas with certain conditions. At the time we approved this last, we only extended it to properties along Main Street. But in that intervening time, we have had renewed interest in the sale of some property on Rand Mill Road. And so this proposed text amendment would add that same allowance for bars, nightclubs, and taverns and properties along Rand Mill Road. They will still need to be have a minimum square footage of 250 square feet that's devoted to food preparation, and they will not be allowed to be open any later than 1 a.m. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them, but this is the chance to present it to the public and see if there's any feedback.
What's the extent of this new designation? How far down how far down Rand Mill Road does it go?
Right, just to where this arrow is right here, where the hand is pointed.
Okay.
That's the limits of the central business district on that side, and then where the purple ends in the green on the east side.
And it's my understanding we're to get public comment tonight, or just refer it to, and then thereafter refer to Planning Commission?
Yep.
All right, we're open for public comment. Da, 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 da. Council have anything to discuss?
I don't believe so. I
Call
hold
for a
hold
motion.
mine for the regular.
Yes, we move it to refer it to Planning Commission.
Second.
Motion made, second, all in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
One more time, Gary.
All right, we're calling conditional use District Z 1908 and CUP SP 1915 Garner Depot. I expect most of you have heard my speech many times, but I'll give a little bit of it and keep it brief. We're here for a conditional use rezoning matter associated with a conditional use site plan. The conditional use rezoning is a legislative rezoning matter. The site plan is a quasi-judicial matter on which testimony will be given only by people with credentials as expert witnesses. First, I'll ask the council if anyone has any preconceived notion, prejudice, or biases that would prevent them from giving a fair decision in this case.
Any down here?
Being no answer to that, I'll ask if anyone's had any ex parte communications they feel needed to close. And
Yes,
if
sir.
there have been none of those, Jeff, who all is going to be testifying on this? Do you know? Is do we have any engineers or designers or anybody from the depot? So and you ladies can testify as public witnesses in support of the. You all be sworn, please. All right, Mr.
Mr. Mayor, at your pleasure, we'll move forward with the zoning presentation. In this case, the applicant and the owners of the property are the town of Garner, working in conjunction with the Garner Area Historical Society. The location of this property is on the southwest corner of West Main and Pearl Streets and constitutes about 1.24 acres. This did go before the Planning Commission at their meeting in August and is now here before you for hearing and possible action. We'll take a brief look at the zoning consistency. Here is an aerial view of the existing site. We have the Pearl Street building that's owned by the town right in this location. And of course, you see the Garner baseball fields to the west and the south. There were at one time 2 existing homes, one on this parcel and one on this parcel. Those have since been demolished and removed. Here's the site from Google Street View. Currently, the property is zoned R12. The adjacent zoning is residential in nature on all sides and is either R9 or R12. However, the uses are somewhat mixed. Most of the residential is a mix of existing single-family detached and duplexes. Of course, you have the railroad passing through the site. Oops, I just went back. Right here. And then, of course, as I mentioned before, the ball fields to the west and south. Not a whole lot of rezoning activity in this area, but what we have seen is from residential to either office institutional or central business district cases, very similar to what we have tonight. The current zoning does allow for medium density with a minimum lot size, traditionally at 12,000 square feet, but can go as low as 9,000 square feet. about low 3s to 3.5 units per acre. The requested zoning would be for central business district conditional. This is an option to provide for and maintain the Main Street Business District, so this would extend it a little bit further down West Main. We put together a proposed permissible use table. It does include some property that would be developed in future phases. We did include the household living that's permitted in the central business district. We included things like community center, other community services, civil clubs, and of course the museum, which is the proposal before you tonight. And then just other similar uses that were fairly appropriate to the scale of the lots and the nature of what you would expect to find in a downtown area. NCDOT traffic counts are not available along Main Street or Pearl, it's just local traffic. Here in the Garner Forward Comprehensive Plan, at the time, we did designate this as high-density residential. However, there was a little bit of tweaking of the language for high-density residential and what that entailed, where some of the language was changed to include or exclude apartments. So actually, this designation doesn't really match the detailed drawing that we have of the downtown area. If it did, it would probably be the mixed-density neighborhood center. But as you can see, we do have town center designation directly across Pearl Street. So this would just take that town center designation and extend it to this corner. Here is that detailed drawing we did of the opportunity site for downtown. And you can see this is the location right here where it says park site. So we did envision that this could be an open space used for different kinds of educational and recreational type uses. And then we did also envision the creation of some higher density residential close to the railroad track and hopefully a future commuter rail station should those baseball fields ever redevelop. We looked at some of the guiding principles established in the plan. One, to create a healthy brand, and two, to influence the design or keep with our character and improve value. Certainly with this being a historic building that would be moved to the site, that would definitely play up on, I believe, the downtown's character and flair and encourage redevelopment that includes that historic structure. So we propose the following zoning consistency statement: that the requested zoning from single-family residential R12 to central business district conditional use, although it's not consistent with the future land use designation of high-density residential, it is consistent with the comprehensive plan's guiding principles of building on and conserving the existing character and commercial development, as well as the downtown's opportunity site sketch that shows a pocket park anchored by a depot-sized building at this site. And so therefore, recommending approval of this rezoning, we can say that it is consistent with some of the plan and then would amend the future land use designation to town center to correct that part of the plan, the map. And that's all I have on the zoning presentation. Did we want to hear from the public before I go into the site plan?
Yeah, I think so. This will be their only opportunity to speak.
Hi, Karen.
My name is Karen Paget, 619 Buffalo Road, Garner. First and foremost, the Garner Area Historical Society is so very appreciative of our town council members and leaders who have nurtured and shared our vision to move and restore the historic depot for use as a museum. You, like we, know that Garner has a valuable story to be told and a history worth saving and celebrating. We also thank the town staff who have been so willing to share their time and professional knowledge with us and who have come to the table many times to work through the details of making this vision a reality. I'd like to share with you a quote that sums up how we feel about this project. The quote is from Erin Napier from the small town of Laurel, Mississippi. She is an artist, designer, and preservationist. She writes, "There's something about the history and majesty of old towns. They tell us who we were, which helps us understand who we are. There's a tendency for us to forget or disregard the old in favor of the new. Just as people come from somewhere, places and objects do too. It's up to people to make sure they don't get buried and forgotten." Again, the Garner Area Historical Society thanks all of you for sharing in this vision.
What else? Let's vote on the vote. Let's vote on the zoning first.
Get the presentation of the site plan first from Mr. Triesenberg.
Okay, moving to the site plan. As noted previously, the acreage is about 1¼ acres. In the lots, there's currently 3 of them, but at some point we'll get them combined into one as the plans materialize going forward. The building size is approximately according to tax records, although I know there's a little discrepancy on that as to what it actually may be. But the tax records show it as 1,334 square feet. Here is the existing building seen today in its position on Garner Road, along with the caboose, which is just a few feet down. For landscaping and buffer requirements, again, because there is a part of, and I'll show it to you in just a few minutes, there will be a part of the site, a substantial part, that's going to be retained as overflow parking for GBI. It's difficult to go ahead and do a lot of the landscaping requirements at this point in time, but we have looked at the landscaping requirements that can be installed without having to be torn up and redone later, and provided those at this time. So that includes a couple of street trees as well as some of the foundation plantings, which are required in close proximity to the actual depot building. Fire protection, the inspections department together with the fire department has reviewed and approved. This is at a high point in town, so there's not any FEMA designated floodplains or Neuse River buffers. It's quite flat. At this time, no mitigation for stormwater required, as it does not increase the impervious area beyond what previously existed. We have added up the square footage from the previous buildings, which is close to, I would say it was somewhere between 2,700 and 3,000 square feet. So we've got a little bit of room to play with there before we trip stormwater requirements. In terms of infrastructure for water and sewer, there is existing water and sewer on Pearl and Main. A couple of the 2 old services will have to be abandoned, and then the new services established. In terms of road infrastructure and sidewalks, Pearl Street currently lacks curb, gutter, and sidewalk. At this point, we envisioned that this would be added with future development of the GBI portion of the tract, and could include on-street parallel parking, but we'll get to some of that with the next item on the agenda. The building will be accessed from the existing parking area in front of the Pearl Street building with a paved walkway and ramps. Here, yes?
Question back to that, the curb and gutter on Pearl Street and Phase 2. What is the future phase going to be, and why are we not doing the curb and gutter now, since we do require that for other new development in town?
So we have put together some cost estimates for you to try to give you an indication of what that might be. Our impression of the instructions at this time was to try to hold some of the costs in check if need be. So in terms of looking at the ordinance and how it's structured, because we envision that the future of this would be combined with the existing Pearl Street building, we're treating it as an expansion of that larger site, And so until we trip certain thresholds, we don't have to, nor would any other developer have to do these things. But we have identified that when we do get to whatever ultimately is done with the GBI overflow part, we're just letting you know that that for sure will trigger those requirements at that time. So we can, and I think we'll talk about that during the next item on the agenda. But at this point, we wanted to show what it will entail, and just at least make you aware of those items. So here on the site, here's the rezoning boundary, the existing Pearl Street building, and their existing parking, walkway to the relocated depot. And then in the future, we may see a little bit more in the way of railroad track between the depot, but at least for right now, the caboose will be positioned here on a short stretch of existing track. There are some other improvements that are grayed in there, but would be part of subsequent modifications that as the Garner Area Historical Society is ready, we can come back and incorporate some of these other minor features into the site going forward. But the area in green is the area that would be retained for the ball field overflow. And then at such time that we come up either from the town, or if that entire property is conveyed to the Historical Society, I know they may have some other things that they would like to do with the balance of that property at that time. There are 5 spaces required with 1 accessible for parking. With the existing parking in front of the Pearl Street building, those spaces are available and would be documented through this process as being shared. When we looked at site plan conformity with the various plans, the 2018 Garner Forward Transportation Plan does not provide any recommendations for Pearl Street beyond what the UDO would require for a local town street. So therefore, this project as proposed may be found at this time in conformity with that plan. Parks and Rec, open space and greenways, there were no additional plan recommendations in this project area beyond what we actually saw in the comp plan. So therefore, this project as proposed may be considered consistent with that. And after sufficient review and plan revision, staff does find that this project is now proposed conforms to the regulations of the UDO so long as the following project conditions are met. And here we just wanted to note, again, for clarity and awareness of all involved, that a landscape plan for the entire site will need to be submitted with the site plan application for that next phase of development that involves the baseball overflow parking area. 2, that prior to the issuance of any certificate of occupancy for a building or structure in that phase, that at that time, at the very latest, Pearl Street shall be widened and improved to its ultimate cross-section. It could be done sooner, but that would be the stopping point. And number 3, prior to the issuance of a building permit for any building or structure not part of this first phase, a recombination plat will be recorded, and that's just to make sure that we actually have a checkpoint to make sure that we get the recombination plat done. So the Planning Commission reviewed this request at their August meeting with a unanimous vote. They did confirm staff's findings that the depot plan is in conformity with adopted town plans and policies, and they further accepted our zoning consistency statement and recommended approval to the council. You have motions on page 76 and 78.
Jeff, can you, excuse me, are we ready for questions? In looking at the cost and the breakout, unless I missed it, I don't believe I see anything there that indicates that the North Carolina Railroad would ante up some costs, pay for some of the cost of this. Is it your understanding that's still a part of the?
If I may interrupt, Councilmember Marshburn, the cost and the presentation concerning that, it will be in the next section, because it's really not to be confused with the site plan portion. So I'll answer those. I'll answer those in the next item.
Very well. Okay, other than that, I don't have any.
Ready for a motion?
Yeah, no. Ready for a motion, I think.
May I make a suggestion? For the one that's been that championed this project earlier than anybody else, Kathy, if you're so inclined, how about you making the motion?
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead, quick.
This is about the fourth time we moved that.
Yeah, to the
Depot. And every time.
come to the podium.
Sir, we need you to come to the podium.
Right there.
Mr. Stansel, tell them the name and your address.
My name is Melvin Stantz. I live at 425 West Main Street, and all I want to know is, how much is this thing going to cost? We moved this building at least 4 or 5 times. And at one time, it was scheduled to be demolished when it was down close to the water tower. And it was salvaged and brought up there and stuck on the side of Garner Road, and then somebody ran into it, and they spent more money to fix it again. So how much is it going to cost to keep shuffling this thing around? Is this going to be the permanent?
Well, we hope so. It's further along than it's ever been, so it's moving now with the right people behind it. It's going to happen now. I can assure you.
Just for clarification, Mr. Mayor, the town was reimbursed for the costs on the repair from the insurance company.
Okay.
So that did not come out of town coffers, just for clarification.
Well, I just wonder, because like I say, it's been moved 4 or 5 times.
You've been a good
It's
neighbor.
good, it's a wonderful thing, but I thought they had already opened it up as a museum, but nobody ever went to it.
Well, they will now. They're coming in by the bus loads.
Okay, that's all I wanted to ask.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, I move that the town council accept the staff's statement regarding zoning consistency with the Garner Forward Comprehensive Plan, detailed in Section 5 of the staff report as our own, and in so doing, also amend and correct the future land use map from high-density residential to town center. I therefore move further that the town council adopt ordinance number 2019-3994, approving rezoning request CUD Z 19-08 as it is reasonable and in the public interest because it will be compatible with the surrounding zoning. It will provide adequate buffering to adjoining residential uses per the conditions. It will allow development that is compatible with the existing uses in the downtown area.
Second. Motion made and seconded. Further discussion. All in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Rodney, historic relocation cost. Just tell you something.
Ms. Behringer's going to make the second motion, the CUP motion.
Yeah, let's finish that.
That's a lot of talking from me in one night. Okay.
You've been quiet the last couple of months. We thought we'd get you caught up in your quota.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, I move that the council accept the staff statements regarding the plan consistency in Section 7 of this report as our own, and find the application meets the 10 permit criteria in Section 3.14D, and therefore approve CUP SP 1915 Garner Depot with 3 standard conditions and the 3 site-specific conditions to be listed on the permit that will be prepared by staff.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Now, Mr. Manager, historic depot relocation. Cost.
All right, Mayor, Town Council, now that you've approved site plan and the rezoning, I will go over some of the cost elements and talk about the phasing, which we're calling phasing, but there's no indication of how long phase 2 will be after phase 1 or whether it'll all get done at the same time. So I want to present you that information so you can make that decision. But going back to the site plan, that you see on the screen there. I'm calling it the base plan because I guess the base plan was just to get the depot there and the caboose and provide access to Pearl Street. So I got cost figures for that. And then through subsequent discussions, there was discussion about adding more parking, adding potentially some more track at a later time to create a feature for the museum. And then also adding a curb and gutter and then sidewalk down to Main Street. So we went back and got estimates on that, and I'll talk you through that. To answer Mr. Marshburn's question, before I get too deep, and we've had conversations with the railroad, and they're amenable to some type of contribution, but what they've asked us to do is to put a proposal along with some other things that they're looking at in the downtown area together so that they can submit it with their December budget requests. So we're going to do that.
What other things? In the
Things we've been
downtown
talking to them about over the years, fencing, the possibility of adding more fencing along the tracks, as well as relocating the depot. And so instead of having several different single requests, they ask us to package it all together, and they would submit it to their board or their managers and consider it all at once.
When would we anticipate having that presentation ready to give to them?
We'll have it as soon as possible. Is there a timeline? We got to get it to them before their December budget submission, so we'll definitely get it to them before then. Whether we need to get it any earlier than that, I'm not sure.
There's new staff at the railroad, there's a new vice president of real estate and a new corridor manager, neither of who were aware of the previous discussions. But we had a very good meeting with them last week. We've talked about the entire corridor that goes through Garner holistically, which is what we had been hoping to do for a long time. And once they realized there were some other opportunities in Garner, like the fencing that Mr. Dickerson mentioned, they suggested they put all that together. So the staff at the railroad is coordinating a time now that our staff can walk the downtown area with their engineering staff, look at opportunities for permanent fencing, look at anything else that we need to do. And once they've had that meeting, we'll get together to decide who should get the price quotes, whether it's us or the railroad, submit those as part of their regular December budget submission, and their year starts in January, so it's not a long time frame.
So this walkthrough will be coming up fairly soon?
Yes, they're hoping to get it scheduled within the next 3 weeks.
All right, what I'm going to do is switch the graphic to the spreadsheet with the cost figures in it so the audience can follow along if they need to. And let's see.
Getting dizzy watching it.
Yeah, right there. All right. See if I can blow it up just a little bit here. Let's see. All right. So as I stated, we started off with a base estimate that included moving both elements, the depot and moving the caboose, so we have separate cost in for that. The caboose is going to take some structural restoration as far as the siding and the exterior elements, which includes replacing siding. There's some areas of rotten wood that's going to have to be changed out. We're required to put a deck and ramp for handicap ADA accessibility. And also that deck will serve as kind of one of the existing features that the depot had on it as far as the loading dock that was at train level. We are going to put it on a permanent footing and foundation, so we certainly hope this is the last time it's going to be moved. And then there's some other elements, improvements to the building to make it more energy efficient and work better. We've got some utility connections as far as HVAC. There's a HVAC unit there now, but we want to reconnect that once it's moved, and there will be electrical hookup. At this point, we're not looking at hooking up to any water or sewer because there is not going to be any plumbing elements in the building. We're going to use the Pearl Street building restrooms and facilities and access to to potable water at that location, which is just a short walk, and there will be a sidewalk to that building. And then there'll be other elements added for safety and security. There is one parcel between the Pearl Street building and the depot site, and we've been in conversations with the Lions Club, and we believe there's going to be agreement worked out for us to acquire that site at a minimal contribution from either us or the Garner Area Historic Society. That may not mean exchange of cash, so I'll just leave it that way because I don't know in particular what that's going to be. But I think that's going to work its way out. And then had some miscellaneous related to the site, and that included things like adding some of the walkways, some of the trees that need to be removed. We're looking at the possibility of relocating a guy wire on an electrical pole, but we don't have any cost figures for that now. But at the minimum, we'll have to try to make that wire safer by putting a covering on it. We've looked at that situation, and there are, a considerable amount of electrical lines connected to that power pole. So we're waiting to hear back about what can be done about that. But at the minimum, we'll try to make the guy wire safer. So that's the base, and we put a 15% contingency on that because anytime you're dealing with replacing exterior siding on a building of that age, we don't know what type of water damage we're going to find. So hopefully, that contingency will help if the costs escalate as far as having to remove and replace more of the building elements than we can readily see and what the contractor saw. So that's pretty much the base estimate. Any questions about that? And that's $354,500. All right. The second column is the expanded scope, and it includes everything I just mentioned. And then we went back and did some cost estimates on the addition of curb and gutter, a sidewalk to Main Street, additional parking, which would be pull-in parking, parallel parking, and it would be also, we added a contingency to those road and curbing items. So that added an additional $147,000 to the cost for a subtotal of $455,000. And then we kept the same contingency for the building, and that brought the total up to $501,500. So, any questions about any of that? All right, I'm gonna go back to the site plan and just talk through, a lot of questions about phasing and those type of things. Certainly, can do as much or as less as the council directs us to do right now. There's, any other elements can be added at any other time that the council wishes, and the budget and the funding's there. So some of the other elements that the Garner Area Historic Society would like to see in the future would be the addition of a shelter in this area. How do you get the red button? The red control. Okay. Control, left click. All right.
Launch your slide.
All right, that's not working for me. Are you in PDF? Oh, I'm back on the PowerPoint. Oh, there we go. All right. So grayed out. Basically, the base elements are in dark gray, as you can see here. The depot, and then there's the caboose and Pearl Street. And then in lighter shading are some of the elements that can be added now or at a later time. And there are some parking spaces located here. They're really faint, but they are there for addition. And then there's additional sidewalk running down this line here all the way to Main Street, connecting to Main Street. And that also includes curb and gutter along the curbing. And in this area, a future shelter, the possibility of a future shelter, which we don't have a price for that. That could be, work out any number of ways. Could be a joint project with the Garner Area Historic Society as far as funding and their fundraising, or, however council chooses to do. But we're not proposing that be built right now. And then some of the other elements, the sidewalk, this sidewalk would have to be built now because that's your access to the Pearl Street building. And then there would be other elements. I know some site elements that the Garner Area Historic Society would like to see is to have a brick patio or a brick walkway that would act as a fundraiser, and they would be engraved bricks. So that's something they would try to do in the near future. And the lot that I referred to from the Lions Club is located here, this strip of land right here. So that pretty much concludes everything as far as cost estimate and site layout. Also in your packet, I put a resolution inside, and it's basically the same as the last one, except for the under the now therefore be it resolved, item number 1 talks about council approves of the funding and process to relocate, which gives the Garner Area Historic Society a more, I guess, concrete standing to go out and ask for money and do their fundraising. And then I also just put a draft of the contract for museum services, which that tends to act more like a lease agreement, so we don't need to enact that until the building's pretty much done or close to being done. We might discover some things that we might want to add in here as we go along, but for the most part, this agreement is about what we would expect to see for this type of arrangement and partnership. So with that, I'll answer any questions.
When are we going to start moving?
We're going to start moving as soon as you approve it. We've already gone back to some of the contractors and tried to get up-to-date numbers or timing. Some, like the moving contractor, would not give us any concrete information until we were closer to moving it. So we're going to go back to him pretty soon. We already started looking at some of the trees. We have, I have someone lined up to do the surveying, just to put the points for the 2 features on the ground floors. We have potentially a couple of contractors that are going to bid on the foundation and footing that we feel real confident about. So we haven't done anything on the site, but we're still working actively to get everything lined up. So
Do you anticipate, I'm sorry, this doesn't seem to be on. When do you anticipate us actually seeing something being done over there?
within the next few weeks or days, just depends. We got to do permits. We got to get the permits first for the building activity, and then we got to clear the site and prep the site.
2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks? The last time somebody told me 2 weeks, that was 3 months ago. Wasn't
Right.
to do with this, but it was something.
My timeline and what I have discussed with the Garner Area Historic Society is to have the depot moved by the end of the year and to have it complete by sometime in the spring.
Y'all happy with that?
I would hate to say I'm gonna do something in 2 weeks and can't deliver. This is a very specialized project.
It is.
And we're not just gonna have contractors knocking at our door to do this work. So we're gonna have to go out and try to find a preservationist type contractor that's gonna take pride in this work and, replace the siding and those type of things. We gotta order the siding. So, I hate to just throw out dates.
I understand that. I know that, but I would like us to be diligent and stay on it rather than waiting sometimes for them to call us back.
Right, I understand, and I've been in constant conversation with these ladies, and they know that I have not let this sleep one bit, and that I'm going to instruct staff for us to get it moving as quick as we can. So, any questions? Other questions?
Well, I would just say that, obviously, this has been a long-term project, probably longer than the Historical Society and others would have preferred, but I want to thank them for their diligence and staying on this and having a vision and trying to help the council see their vision and act on it. And so hopefully we have tonight. So is there any other motion that's needed?
I think it was important for us, and I delayed this whole thing, and you can blame me for it, and that's quite all right, that I wanted to see a plan and a budget. We got the plan, we've approved the plan, we got a budget before us, and I'll recommend that we adopt resolution number 2019-2388, and so doing incorporate therein the approval of budget for the Phase 1 project.
Second.
All in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed.
All right, and for clarification, the Phase 1, you're talking, the base
Yeah.
plan project without the parking and curb and gutter and that?
Well, it's got some parking, but I think we've
The
been looking
additional
at Phase 1 all along.
Okay. All right. I just want to make sure we're clear on what we're setting out to do. Okay. All right. Y'all have anything to add? You're good? All right.
Okay, next is the, okay, the amendment to contract, Audi according to, anyway, David Jackson. This resolution.
Good evening. What I'm bringing for you tonight to consider is an amendment to the audit contract for fiscal year 2019. Due to the turnover in the finance office and the timing of when some of that turnover has occurred, we're in a position where we probably need some additional assistance from the auditors to prepare the actual financial report. Portions of it will still be prepared by the finance department staff, but the auditors can step in and fill some of that gap with the turnover and the vacancies like I mentioned. So this would amend the existing audit contract and increase the price by $4,000, which would take it to a total of $33,500. Just for comparison purposes, the final audit price for fiscal year 2018 was $36,500, so we're still below what we paid last year. So we would ask that you do consider amending that contract, and then we can send that on.
Okay, council, have questions?
Mayor, I move we approve the amended audit contract by $4,000, taking the total price to $33,500.
Second.
All in favor, vote by saying aye.
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 Thank you.
Anderson, Mr. Attorney.
Yes, sir. Mr. Mayor, this is a matter which is in the agenda on page 96. This is a proposed tweaking or making some slight modifications to the town ordinance in the town code dealing with parades, picketing, and demonstrations. Basically, once in a while, I learn something from my colleagues in the municipal law world, and I learned fairly recently about a circumstance that had not been on my radar before that. Was a case in which City of Raleigh, which had an ordinance very similar to ours, that they were enacted back in the 50s and not been changed hardly since then. Raleigh was challenged in requiring persons who wanted to have a small, few people, small group picket or demonstration, having them to have to go to a police chief and get a permit 24 hours in advance. And the matter went to the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals in Richmond, which held that you don't really need, there's no justification for having to do all that permitting in advance if it's very small, because the purpose of the permitting is to get the police notified, they can be out and do whatever they need to do about traffic or crowd control or whatever. And so basically, the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals said that you need to be constitutionally valid, you need to have a small group exemption for ordinances of this sort. And so I'm just proposing we update ourselves and get constitutionally valid in that regard. The specific purposes or specific changes that I'm proposing are on page 97, definition of group demonstration. Basically, I think we had earlier had 2 or more persons, and I want to just change that to 10 or more, because that's basically one way to avoid having any claim that we're denying anybody's rights. Make the same proposed change in the definition of parade and same change in the definition of picket line. Come on to page 98. We just threw in another exemption. Obviously, you don't have to get this kind of permit from the police chief to be in the Christmas parade. That was sort of self-evident, but I thought while we were doing it, we'd go ahead and do it. And ask Chief Zudem if he had any ideas or questions, and we looked real hard at the prohibited conduct issues on page 99, and we clarified that whether you're a large group or a small group, you still have to behave in an appropriate fashion as is set forth in the other provisions of this section. And if you misbehave, it's punishable as a Class 2 misdemeanor. We'll put the same thing in for anybody who is interfering with a picket line or demonstration. Basically, with these changes, we think we've got this updated probably for another 30 years. Anybody got any questions? Small item, but just one that needed to be looked at.
Need a motion, Mr. Mayor? I'll make one. I'll move that we approve ordinance 2019-3995, an ordinance amending the town code in regards to parades, picket lines, and demonstrations.
I second that motion.
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Very good. Let's go to committee reports. Go to manager reports.
All right, Mr. Mayor, Town Council, you have Garner info in your packet, if you have any questions about that. I left little time to do a weather update, but I think right now we're just kind of waiting to see. Wake County does not plan on activating the EOC right now. I think, we're going to get some wind. They're still kind of tracking, trying to see where the storm goes, but right now there's no plans for any local shelters for local folks or any emergency operations center at this point. So we'll just continue to monitor. Some events to name, Latin Fest will be Sunday. That had previously been Carnival Latino, but we've partnered with, I believe BB&T or another entity to do an event and kind of combine it with something they were doing at Lake Benson Park. It's going to be from 1 to 5 on Sunday. And then also this weekend is the renaming of Rand Mill Park to Jackie John Senior Park. And that's going to be Saturday, and I believe the actual ceremonial part starts at 2. And we've got a couple of concerts and things coming up at the GPAC. One of the notable ones is the Brian Owens concert on September 12th, excuse me. And then also we got another one of our town hall pop-up town hall sessions, something we started just a few months ago just to go out and give the community information and let them ask us questions. And this one's going to be, topic is going to be Parks, Rec, Cultural Resources from 6 to 7 at the Bearded Lady.
What was the date on that?
And what was the date? The 10th, yeah. I forgot to write that down. September 10th. And that's all I have.
Mr. Attorney. Council, let's start with Mr. Vance.
Well, I would say, Mr. Mayor, that it was a very spirited and necessary discourse we had tonight with the community relative to a major development, which was my first one of this kind, and the order, appreciate the order and the research and the diligence of the staff, and also of the even of the community to come out and voice their concerns moving forward. But the town is growing, grew by 10% in a year, so who knows what it's going to look like this year. So it's moving in a upward trajectory when it comes to growth. So expect to have those growing pains as we move forward.
Yes, sir, I have a couple of things. I mentioned at the work session last week about the event this coming Saturday at the NC State Capitals from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. North Carolina Women Breaking Barriers, and it's open to all who want to come. It's free. And the second thing is, one of the speakers alluded to not knowing anything about the Garner Forward Plan and what was involved in it and so forth. And for the benefit of those who might be watching, I would just like to offer what was said to me 30 years ago when I complained or was not happy that I didn't know what was going on around in my neighborhood, and I was not very kindly told that it was not anyone else's responsibility to find out. It was my responsibility to learn. That being said, all these documents are available for public to see and to have copies of if they wish, and we're not trying to hide anything. It's out there, but we do have to take initiative and find it for ourselves.
I'm supposing that other council members didn't receive this. The Triangle J Council of Government are sponsoring what they call an elected officials breakfast. This is on October the 10th at the Chatham Agriculture and Conference Center. It takes place before a Triangle JCOG a regional summit. And so if anybody is interested in attending, they wanted to know, I think, before or by September the 26th, which is obviously some time away. The cost is $10 per attendee. If you haven't been to a regional summit, that would probably be an interesting event to attend. I won't be able to attend this year, but so I just wanted to make my fellow council members aware of that. I think that's the only item I have.
Great.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we have two items on our consent agenda tonight that are important to note. One was the formal resolution to rename Rand Mill Park as Jackie John Senior Community Park. Action we took a few weeks back. That was the formal resolution. Also, the other consent agenda item was to award the contract for the construction of the Spring Drive and Vandor Springs Road sidewalk project. That'll be a sidewalk which will start where the sidewalk currently ends on the Garner High School, Magna High School property. It'll proceed on the north side of Spring Drive all the way up to the intersection with Vandor Springs Road. It'll turn and go north and connect to the existing sidewalk on Vandor Springs Road on that side of the road there past the Catholic Church. It also includes some road widening on Vandor Springs Road, 2 to 3 feet of asphalt to be widened to make the lanes wider. Also curb and gutter on that side, so that'll be a significant improvement, making Vandor Springs Road safer, making it wider, and also connecting another loop to our sidewalks in town. So that's one we've been working on a long time. We've got 3 other sidewalk projects that are moving forward. So just let citizens know that this one's being awarded and it'll probably be constructed and finished next spring. It's not going to be started because of the winter coming up, but they'll be getting things prepared to complete that project in the spring. So I just want to formally mention that. That's all, Mr. Mayor.
I appreciate the patience with the Garner Area Historical Society in being patient until we got a plan for them that they knew exactly what was going on, and then getting a budget established for it. Now they've got a firm plan, and I think they heard the gun go off for the start of the race tonight, and I do appreciate not only their patience, but I appreciate them having being persistent and reestablishing the 501c3, extending their membership, and already starting the process to have a broader base of support. And I expect good things will come from that, and Garner will appreciate it down the road. Any other comments, I can just wait for another time. Move to adjourn.
And I have one other event I'd like to mention real quick, Mr. Mayor, is it's a continuation of some event that the police department has been having out in the community. It's called the Barbershop Rap Session. The second one's going to be September 18th at Diamond Cuts Barbershop off of 5th Avenue, and that's from 6:30 to 8. The first one was in the barbershop at Forest Hills, Heavenly Cuts, and it was very successful, had a packed house, and it's basically to engage the community and police in discussion about community and policing and how we can all, get along and how interactions happen and have a better understanding of each other, so.
I got my hair cut there recently, and I saw all the clientele were African American, the employees were African American. I went in there, and I said, "Do you cut white boy's hair?" He said, "Do white boy have money?" I thought that was cute.
Pertinent question. Yes. Got to the heart of the matter pretty quickly.
Motion to adjourn earlier, right?
I had a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.